Okay, it's JR Eclipse time, baby. Oh, this is going to be so fucking stupid. All right, let's do it. All right.
Experience.
Questions Colin Kaepernick's motives.
Colin Kaepernick thing. All right. Don't you think that at least some good has come out of him doing that, where it sort of raised awareness for police brutality? Just put it to the forefront. Let people understand that this is a problem.
No.
Not at all?
No, because I think that he made a serious error, which is that the most positive movements in American social history have been ones that don't kneel for the flag, but say, in the name of the flag, you should do X. Right? So Martin Luther King said, in the name of the flag, civil rights are necessary. Booker T. Washington said, in the name of the flag, civil rights are necessary. They didn't say the American flag stands for racism and Jim Crow. They said the American flag stands for something beyond that. Live up to the American flag.
But here's
No, absolutely not. Just so insanely incorrect. I guess it doesn't really matter though, because it's Ben Shapiro time, baby. Like, how do you start off with that? Pause counter. Do not call out pauses. I'm gonna pause a lot. Shut the fuck up. MLK, a very strong anti-imperialist activist who was regarded as a communist, an agitator, a liar who was just stoking racial fears by the overwhelming majority of people, including liberals, who openly stated his disdain for the white moderate, even the liberals. Ben Shapiro acting like MLK would be on his side on any particular issue, or that he would be on MLK's side on any particular issue, is psychotic. He supported Ho Chi Minh, okay? He was considered to be a terrorist at the time. 67% of Americans at the time of his assassination did not like him. You can talk about how Colin Kaepernick's movement has been co-opted by capitalist forces and commoditized, and that's precisely how you neuter actual radical progressive causes. That's one thing. That's a legitimate leftist critique of Colin Kaepernick. Saying that he was actually attacking the flag and that's why it's bad is fucking bullshit.
Here's my
Trashing the American flag is like endemic of police brutality. First of all, it's bullshit. But second of all, it's actually divisive on an issue that does not need to be divisive. Like, nobody is in favor of police brutality, nor should anyone be.
Right. Here's the counterpoint. Why is it trashing the American flag to take a knee? Isn't that in some ways just another gesture of respect? Like, you're not doing what everybody wants you to do, which is put your hand over your heart, but you're doing something that's also respectful and silent. You're not standing up and going, fuck the American flag, fuck these people. You're actually taking it to another level of respect. You're taking a knee. You're bending the knee. Whether you're doing it for something that you want to talk about later, saying, I'm not going to stand up because this is my way of acknowledging the fact that there have been a lot of people that have been mistreated by police and murdered by police, and this is how I do it. This is how I treat racist police killing black people. I take that moment to take a knee. Like, how is that so disrespectful? Like, how is that?
What?
It's a silent
okay,
gesture.
Joe.
It's not uniform. Like,
Mild
it's not doing
pushback.
this thing that everybody else is doing. But you're doing something that's very respectful. You're taking a knee.
Well, that's certainly not the...
Not only was he taking a knee, but Colin Kaepernick originally would sit down on purpose during the national anthem. Okay? And then only after talking to Green Beret veteran Nate Boyer, who originally criticized them, but then came to an understanding, developed an understanding of what Colin Kaepernick was talking about. Nate Boyer's suggestion was for him to kneel. And that's why Colin Kaepernick started kneeling. A fundamental fact in this story that you will never hear from conservatives. They will never, ever, ever bring this up.
You don't love the spirit of justice.
Okay?
You love your father, the devil.
Nate Boyer said, you kneel just like we kneel for our fallen brothers. And that's precisely why Colin Kaepernick started kneeling. Why won't Ben Shapiro mention that? Joe Rogan probably doesn't know any better. That's why he doesn't know that. Why? Why won't Ben Shapiro mention that? Why won't any of the conservatives ever mention that? Why is this always a new piece of information for a lot of you who haven't watched my broadcast or who haven't seen my many videos that I've done on this matter when it was a contentious issue. It's because they're fucking liars, dude. That's why.
The way that he intended it when it first started that way. I mean, if you want to interpret it that way, you can.
How do you know what his intention was?
Because he literally talked about it. I mean, he said that America
wanted to highlight that.
Right, he said
Wait,
America
Joe might
is a
mention it. I don't
systemically
know,
racist country. He wore socks with pictures of cops as pigs on them.
Did he?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know.
Oh,
that.
yeah. I mean, Colin
Who cares? Who fucking cares? Who cares? You little baby back bitch. It's expression, okay? It's a freedom of expression. I thought you were Mr. Free Speech. Turn around and ask that to him. I thought it's not even political. It's not an expressly political message that he has.
Your father, the
Who cares?
devil.
Hassle, hassle, hassle.
You fucking pussy. You fucking baby back bitch. I'm sick and tired of these conservative fucking babies, dude. God damn. He wears socks. He wears socks with pigs on them. Oh, God.
Kaepernick is a terrible spokesperson for this movement. Like, again, these should
many
be one
people that have taken a knee. And don't you think that if you just look at the gesture itself, isn't taking a knee even more respectful than standing with your hand over your heart?
Mention Nate Boyer. Mention
then I
Nate
imagine
Boyer.
millions of us
Mention
would-
Nate Boyer.
routinely take a knee for the American flag. I mean, the idea
It
of
wouldn't, if that was the thing you had to do,
if the idea, but again,
and
the
this
idea,
guy decided to stand and put his hand over his heart. Really, it's sort of a traditional thing where we're arguing over.
well, I mean, it isn't the way that it was originally expressed. It sort of morphed over
Right,
time
right,
to the
but
point
it's
where it doesn't
not-
necessarily mean what he originally meant it
It's
to mean.
not like he's going "fuck you" while everybody else has their hand over their heart in silence.
But
he's taking a knee.
He did mean it as an FU. I mean, there's no question that's what he meant it as. And it wasn't even over something that actually made sense. Like, you understand during the civil rights movement, when people are raising the black power fist at the Olympics to say, like, we're fighting for civil rights, Jim Crow is still in operation around the country.
Right.
Colin Kaepernick taking the knee to symbolize that America's police are systemically brutal and racist is just, it's factually untrue. And to
Okay. Oh my God. He is on his back foot. I can't believe Joe Rogan literally Brazilian jiu-jitsu'd Ben Shapiro. I'd never thought I would see this. This is wild.
attribute that to the American flag is really kind of nasty.
But he's not a statistician, right? So he's looking at things like the Eric Gardner case, or which is a terrible one, right? There's cases that you see, like when the guy's just selling loose cigarettes and they're strangling them in front of the store. It's a terrible case. You see something like that, and that motivates him to do that. And I know what you're saying, that these are anecdotes, and this doesn't encompass the full statistics of cops versus black men and how what is exactly is happening. But that's not his area of expertise anyway. He has an issue.
Well, I mean, I agree with that. So making him a spokesperson for a movement where he has no expertise is a weird thing to do. There are plenty of people.
Yeah. Like, literally, virtually every single activist. Sir, first of all, have you studied the blade, sir? Sorry. Simply being black is not enough to understand police brutality. What you have to do is become an expert statistician. What are you an expert of, Ben Shapiro? Like, what are you an expert of? I will never understand this. Like, are you an expert on any number of the issues that you declare yourself the foremost authority on? No. Shut the fuck up. Sorry, Sweaty. I'm actually an expert in debating 18-year-olds on the internet, so that's what I'm an expert in. I'm an expert in talking fast, so technically every time I talk fast, I win.
People who talk about this with actual statistical
right. But if you're
knowledge.
Also, there is statistical knowledge. Like, for example, the multiple times higher likelihood, according to numerous empirical evidence, numerous fucking studies conducted on this matter, that unarmed black people are, especially between the ages of 18 to 35, are 21 times more likely to be killed in the hands of the fucking police. Unarmed black people. Unarmed black men are more likely to be killed in the hands of the police. Black men in general are 3 times more likely to be killed by cops in comparison to white people. There is plenty of statistical evidence that also shows that, yes, in our current criminal justice system, black people definitely lead to being black increases the likelihood that you are going to have an undesirable outcome when you have an altercation with police officers. According to the same statistics that Ben Shapiro is talking about, he can turn around and constantly say, only 19 black people were killed. It's not that big of a problem. Only 19 unarmed black people were killed. It's not that big of a problem. But that completely avoids the overwhelming majority of police altercations where cops escalate and oftentimes escalate to use disproportionate violent use of force in meaningless traffic stops or any number of different reasons for why black people and white people get stopped. Police brutality is a very real problem, regardless of how Ben Shapiro tries to make it seem like it's not.
Famous person, and you decide to take this big stand publicly like that.
After you get benched for Blaine Gabbert, yeah. After you get benched for Blaine Gabbert and take millions of bucks from a major corporation currently oppressed.
Is that the
Blaine
guy
Gabbert was the guy.
him?
Yeah, the immortal Blaine Gabbert, the Hall of Famer Blaine Gabbert, who played
I know nothing about sports.
Blaine Gabbert was an NFL quarterback who sucked. I mean, he was terrible. And
Well, neither does Ben Shapiro. He doesn't know anything about sports either. Ben, I'm sorry, but you already owned yourself. You are not a foremost authority on this subject, and you're talking about sports. Very clearly, you've never played a sport, so get wrecked.
and they benched Colin Kaepernick for him. And it was after he got benched that he started doing the kneeling for the American flag.
I am
which is a pretty good gig.
Sports broadcaster who knows nothing about sports.
Listen,
people try to talk to me about
if you'd explain,
Jamie
let's
makes
put
fun
this
of me all
way.
the
If
time
you'd
about
explain it the way that you're explaining it,
Yes.
meaning we're not living up to the American flag, which is why I'm kneeling, I wouldn't be arguing with it. He didn't explain it that way. That wasn't the way it went down.
But it's just him. What do you think about there's certain guys that like lock arms during the American flag?
I have a problem with that.
Okay. Locking arms is okay, but kneeling's bad?
Well, no. Well, the way that he characterized his kneeling was bad.
Okay.
Meaning,
him. But what about other people that kneel?
if they characterize it differently, it means a different thing.
Okay.
Right? I mean,
I see what you're saying.
Meaning, like,
Oh my God, his face is like, okay.
What
Okay,
about other
Ben.
people that kneel?
Okay, Ben, let's move on.
if they characterize it differently, it means a different thing.
Look at his face.
Right? I mean,
I see what you're saying.
Meaning,
Okay. All right. We'll move the conversation. All right, got it. I can't believe he's getting fucking rolled by literally a self-admitted ape. Okay? This is not the height of the halls of intelligentsia. It's fucking Joe Rogan. A person who is like, yeah, I'm pretty dumb. Like, I'm a pretty dumb guy. Which I really appreciate him for at least admitting that.
like, what it originally was is what it was. I'm
Right.
not going to
Stoned
retcon
ape.
what he
Right.
meant at the time.
He was the first to do it, right?
Right. And then he made millions of dollars for his bravery. Again, I don't think it takes a whole hell of a lot of bravery to be benched for Blaine Gabbert, take a knee, make millions of bucks from Nike.
I wish
while
I knew who
proclaiming
this
that
Blaine Gabbert fellow was.
Yeah. The hidden implication here, which is something that Ben Shapiro and a lot of Republicans engage in whenever they're trying to make this argument, is that Colin Kaepernick knew that he was going to be blackballed or blacklisted for taking a stand against police brutality, and that he knew that once he was blacklisted, he was going to secure a multi-million-dollar deal from Nike. Like, he had the wherewithal and the foresight to be able to carefully construct his moves to potentially get a couple $1 million from Nike as a part of a brand deal. It was it's just 5D chess.
terrible QB rating is all you really need to know. Not a good quarterback.
Really
is the
good
answer.
stuff.
So is Colin Kaepernick? I mean, I don't as an
And for the people who are saying it's all about clout, I think that you guys are having a Berenstein Bear moment. And what I mean by that is, at the time when Colin Kaepernick decided to speak out against police brutality, Black Lives Matter's popularity wasn't where it is right now. Right now, 64% of Americans believe that Black Lives Matter is an honorable cause, and that the protests that are happening around the country, are justifiable, even if it's fucking violent in certain circumstances. Now, that was absolutely not the case when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling. As a matter of fact, liberals, including the Pod Johns, and many centrist liberals were against Black Lives Matter's methods. Barack Obama literally called the Ferguson protesters criminals and thugs. I remember that at the time because I was in support of Black Lives Matter and shocked that liberals were routinely criticizing BLM. This is something that you will never ever fucking hear from anyone else now, because we've all moved past it and people have moved on and people changed their minds. You know when they changed their minds? When Donald Trump stood up against Colin Kaepernick. So when Colin Kaepernick initially did this, when Colin Kaepernick initially protested, he was coming off the heels of a Super Bowl loss. He's a Super Bowl quarterback. Only after when Donald Trump went against Colin Kaepernick did everyone decide to finally take a stance alongside Colin Kaepernick. It wasn't because of the cause. They didn't find the cause worthy. It was because their cause was against Donald Trump now.
athlete. Is he not good? Like,
He's a terrific athlete. He's just not a very good quarterback.
okay.
So, I mean, he had one fantastic season. He led the 49ers to the Super Bowl. And then, like a lot of kind of one-hit wonders in sports, people kind of figured him out season 2, and his QB rating started to decline. But, I mean, look, bottom line is that making him the spokesperson of a movement where he really – I don't like the idea that you are going to attribute to all of America a sin that is, number one, anecdotal in nature, and number two, cannot be attributed to America's highest ideals. You're doing it wrong. If you want to fight police brutality, say America is not living up to her promises. Say that the promise of America, there is a way to convince. Every successful social movement in American history has done this. The gay rights movement did this. The gay rights movement said, listen, everybody in America has been guaranteed a certain level of freedom. And we're not being guaranteed that level of freedom, right? The freedom to pursue happiness is not.
I hate this. I hate this. Dog, you literally were against gay marriage until it was legalized, and then you found a new way to still continue criticizing homosexuals. You literally did it on this podcast. Last time you were on this podcast, why are you acting like these were honorable causes from your point of view? You have literally never thought these were honorable causes. Like, does anyone here, and I mean literally anyone, does even the staunchest of Ben Shapiro fans, do they actually believe that if in 1964 Ben Shapiro was alive, he would be pro MLK? Like, are you fucking nuts? No, this is what conservatives do. They know that once the Overton window is shifted and it's codified through legal progress, through actions taken at the legislative level, that they can't go back. That's why they fucking advocate against change so hard. Because they know once it's solidified, it's very difficult to roll it back. That's why they fucking fight against change so much. And that's why they act like they fucking totally are on board with like LGBT rights now when they're not. And clearly they're not.
Not being guaranteed to us. We're just asking that we be left alone. Leave us alone. And it took time, but most Americans came around to that perspective. The same thing holds true on race. The same thing holds true on police brutality. If you make an invocation and you say to Americans, as Americans, I know that over time my fellow Americans are going to come to realize that they need to live in accordance with the fundamental principles that founded the country. Mm-hmm. That's unifying. To say that the American flag is inherently non-unifying is really bad. Like to the point where you now have college campuses where if you fly an American flag, there have been cases where people are asked to take it down because it's too divisive. Like that.
This is not a real thing.
You don't love the spirit of justice.
If this were to happen at some fucking crazy like liberal arts college that's like 35 fucking students deep, please stop acting like this is a thing that happens all around the fucking country. It's not a real anecdote, okay? It's not. Like, let's say it happened in fucking Berkeley. Who gives a fuck? It's not indicative of a larger systemic issue, okay? It's such a fucking insane, trivial matter that you, in the most psychopathic capacity, are searching for it so you can create a larger problem like, you know, liberals are actually around burning American flags left and right on college campuses. This way, you get to not even have a conversation that you originally were having, and now you are down the Ben Shapiro rabbit hole. Now we're having a conversation on your terms about a ridiculous thing. Whenever people do this in arguments, conservatives love doing this shit because they track this sort of stuff religiously. They will find anything that they can to fucking glom onto so they can use it as though it's like a indicative of a systemic issue and a larger problem. Just say, we're not having that conversation. That's fucking ridiculous. This is actually something that Destiny does really well. He'll just be like, yeah, that's crazy. Move on and recenter the conversation back to the actual argument that we were having, which is the efficacy of the Black Lives Matter movement or kneeling for the fucking national anthem. The original argument that Joe Rogan had was a very strong one, okay? Is it bad to kneel peacefully for the fucking national anthem for Black Lives Matter? And now we're having a conversation about flags being burned in some random fucking college, or not even flags being burned, flags being considered too divisive. Shut the fuck up, okay? A symbol of national unification, such as the flag, is not going to be considered a fucking divisive thing for like 98% of Americans, okay?
That seems crazy.
That's
that
wild.
does seem crazy. When you say it's anecdotal, that he's reacting to something that's anecdotal, but there's many of those anecdotes, and you see them over and over again. The problem is they're so prevalent. There's so many videos.
So
my friend Joe Schilling is a kickboxer, and his entire Instagram has been dedicated to bad cops over the last few months, just showing all these videos of cops. I mean, yes, it's anecdotal, but goddamn, there's a lot of anecdotes.
Well, there are 330 million police interactions every year. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean that's.
Now, what was the initial interaction what was his motivation to do that? Was there a single instance of police brutality that caused him to do that?
I'm trying to remember which season he did this. This would have been 3-4 years ago. So I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was the Michael Brown situation, because I remember there were protests in the NFL over Michael Brown, right, which was actually a bad anecdote. Like, that was a bad one for people to pick. People were doing the hands up, don't shoot. That didn't actually happen.
Right, he actually tried to grab the gun from the cop.
The gun went off in the car. He charged the cop by witness testimony. All the witnesses were black. The
Eric Gardner one is much cleaner, right?
Well, the Eric Garner one is cleaner in terms of police brutality. It's not super clean in terms of racism or even cause of death. So this is one of the problems.
Yes, police brutality.
Police brutality for sure. It's kind of like it's actually.
Bro, he got choked out for a fucking Lucy, and Michael Brown is still an injustice. When you have a fucking police force that executes a child, okay? When you have a police force that executes a child, like, that's still a fucking injustice, okay?
Again,
By the way,
everyone is kneeling.
I want this pussy to say the exact same thing about George Floyd. So, see that? Now, that's the difference. George Floyd was killed in an exact same circumstance as Eric Garner. They choked him out too. Is he going to say, oh, it wasn't led by racism or whatever? It's not the individual's racism. It's not the individual's racist opinions in that moment, okay? It is systemic racism. That is the gigantic problem here.
Actually, I'm warning people now that what happens in the George Floyd case with Derek Chauvin, like, they should be warned up front. I want this police officer punished. I think everyone wants the police officer punished. The defense is going to make a case that the police officer is not responsible for George Floyd's death in exactly the same way that the New York police officers made the case that they were not responsible for Eric Garner's death. And the autopsy, the initial autopsy tends to support that. So what that suggests is not that Derek Chauvin is good or clean or decent, but if you're going to charge him with murder, that's a hard charge to make, just on a legal level. So I'm warning people now of that, because the next move will be, obviously the system is racist. If Derek Chauvin doesn't get convicted of first-degree murder, it's going to be very hard to convict him. I think they're charging him with second. It's going to be very difficult to convict him of second.
He has to be charged with second, right? Because at first would mean premeditated.
Right, third. Well, he was charged with third originally, and then Keith Ellison, the AG over there, elevated it to second degree. I think that's very difficult to make the case for second-degree murder.
What were you pulling up, Jamie?
Why would it be very difficult to convict for second-degree murder? It's only difficult if you move the trial from Minneapolis to a predominantly white area with a predominantly white jury that's going to be more pro-cop, which I'm certain is what they're going to try to do. That's the only time it will be difficult to convict on second-degree murder. It's not difficult to convict on second-degree murder in the state of Minnesota. It is already insane. Like, second-degree and third-degree murder is still insanely difficult to fucking convict on. Like, the laws in Minnesota on this are psychotic. Even if the cop knew that his actions were potentially murderous, they have to know that the person had murderous intent, I believe.
Something you want to say?
Yeah, well, I had the part of when this actually started in 2016. He started let's keep doing that. He started by sitting, and people started getting video of him sitting as the preseason was starting. So he then talked to a teammate.
Jamie!
They discussed kneeling was the
Pull that
best
shit
thing
up,
for him to do.
university!
Do you know which incident kind of kicked it off?
That's why I was going to play the video of it. That's why I had here the actual first video of him talking about him donating $1 million to the local community. I think he had guns drawn on him, which is probably what started.
Okay.
But here's him talking about that.
Wait,
And I've been very blessed to be in this position and be able to make the kind of money I do. And I have to help these people. I have to help these communities. It's not right that they're not put in the position to succeed or given those opportunities to succeed. And as far as taking a knee tonight, Eric, as well as myself, had a long conversation with Nate Boyer, who is a military vet, and we were talking to him about how can we get the message back on track and not take away from the military, not take away from pride in our country.
Pull that shit up, young Jamie.
Keep the focus on
Pull
what
it.
the issues really are.
Pull
And
that
as
shit
we
up.
talked about it, we came up with taking the knee because there are issues that still need to be
Sweating.
addressed, and it was also a way to try to show more respect to the men and women that fight for this country.
Okay, so that's better, obviously. Can you
But that's him.
Scroll down for a second, because I think
But
that
that's
there-
his. That's 2016.
So
That's
here's
the
look
first
at this one.
reaction.
Okay, look at the one right below that. Okay, this is the one I'm talking
Okay,
about.
I'm not going to stand
Rogan
up to show
podcast,
pride in a
7
flag for a
Black
country
Job.
that oppresses black people and people of color. To
That's
me,
the sentence right there.
So that's a different.
The video
a
we just
different
watched
tenor.
was
Yeah.
4 or 5 days after these statements were made. So he said he changed after talking to someone. He made changes to what was going
okay.
on.
Right. So the initial explanation is the one that I was talking about.
Okay, so
Oh,
he revised.
wait, how many years ago was the initial explanation, you fucking racist bitch? You fucking racist alt-light bitch? Oh, that was 4 years ago? Why are you working with 4 years plus 5 days instead of 4 years ago where he changed his way of advocacy? I wonder why he's still going with 4 years plus 4 instead of 4 years and that's it.
his feelings on it.
And then,
Well, that
not to
seems
mi- he
super
kinda,
reasonable.
So it started with this.
Kaepernick had guns drawn on him by cops for being one of the only black guys in his town. Yeah, that seems super reasonable. What he said there about having
The second
respect
take after
for
talking
law
the military,
enforcement
yeah, that's
or
better.
Military rather.
Pull that shit up, university. Why didn't you do your fucking job, Ben? Aren't you a fucking political commentator? It's not like this information wasn't readily available to you, Ben. It's been 4 years, Ben. You're still talking about Colin Kaepernick, Ben. What the fuck? I've been saying this shit for fucking 4 years, motherfucker. 4 years. There is no way that these conservative cucks are unfamiliar with this story. They have purposefully avoided it, okay? That's it. Because they only give a fuck about making a fucking point. They only give a fuck about winning the argument, not the larger issue at hand.
Yeah.
although he recently released a video that sort of goes back to the original explanation, suggesting that America is endemically and systemically racist, which is a problem.
That's a hot take right now. It's good. It's very popular.
Yeah, no, that's the big one. That's the big one.
Spirit of
Yeah.
justice.
Imagine getting owned by a weed enthusiast and his editor. Jesus Christ, dude. All right, let's move on. Ben Shapiro on the left's targeting of historic statues. I doubt that any of these other videos are going to be Joe owning Ben again, but my fucking God.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
You saw this
That
Trader
was
Joe's
good.
story,
You
right?
were telling me earlier.
This is wild. So Trader Joe's
You
is
don't
called Trader
love the
Joe's,
spirit of
right? Which
justice.
is not racist,
You
I guess.
love
But
your
apparently
father, the
they
devil.
have Mexican products that they were calling Trader Jose's. And some bored person in their basement decided to create a petition that got signed by some 2,400 other bored people about why it shouldn't be called Trader Jose's because that's racist. So apparently it's cultural appropriation if you're Trader Joe's and you make a burrito. But if you call it Trader Jose's, then that's, I think they called it exoticizing Mexican.
Who cares? Absolutely, who cares? Who's upset about this? Are there people actually upset about this? Who cares? Ben Shapiro's doing that same thing. He's doing that same fucking thing, dude. Highlighting some random dumb shit. Some random fucking dumb shit that, like, was probably pushed by white people exclusively for some other white people. And now they're having this conversation. And now this is at the forefront of the systemic problems. I can't wait for this to go to. I
Yeah.
can't wait for this to fucking move on to the Ben Shapiro on the left's targeting of historic statues. Let's watch.
It's making them exotic and other. So Trader Joe's pulled it down. Trader Joe's is gonna not
Here it
use
is.
this anymore.
17-year-old called out. 17-year-old called out Trader Joe's. Now the chain is dropping offensive labeling.
Offensive to whom? Who? Like how many Hispanics were picketing outside Trader Joe's, being, now that I saw that Trader Jose beer.
Right. Listen, I'm Italian. Do you think Papa?
Oh, God. Oh, bad arguments galore. Okay, hold on. Hold the fuck on. What is he about to say? Oh, no, dude. Oh, no. What is he about to fucking say, dude?
Gino's? Is that really? I mean, is that really an Italian who made that company? Like, how many different like different pizza companies and all these
I
not
would love
run
to
by
see,
Italians
honestly,
at all.
God, I'd love to see the racial breakdown of the people who signed this petition. I would bet 90% of them are white.
Yeah.
90%.
Okay, they're both right on this. Okay, this notion that like Latino people are frustrated by like cultural appropriation to this degree or whatever. I haven't seen it. It is the ongoing Latinx conversation. I try to be respectful, especially if there's like a non-binary Latine person. I say Latinx if that's what they want to be called or whatever. But the overwhelming majority of Hispanics, the overwhelming majority of Latinos do not give a single fuck. They do not they do not appreciate the Latinx designation. It's completely fucking Americanized bullshit. This is the same conversation over and over again. All right? Not a serious conversation. They should have just dropped it as soon as they saw a 17-year-old high school student puts a petition out there. The real problem isn't like Trader Jose's or some shit. Okay? The real problem isn't Trader Jose's. The real problem is Trader Joe's using migrant workers or exploiting migrant workers to fucking to beef up their agricultural production. That's usually the real problem. All right? Migrant workers mostly comprised of Latino people. So that's supposed to be the heart of the issue. Why the fuck are people just like, oh my God, I can't believe that they're changing the names, blah, blah, blah. Like one way or the other, this conversation is dumb as fuck. Okay? So, as I was saying, this is liberal nonsense. Okay? Representative politics with nothing else behind it. That's it. Everybody intrinsically and instinctively understands that this is just a bullshit fucking combo. The people that are advocating for this shit, more often than not, also understand this is a bullshit combo, but it's something to make themselves feel like they're actually reaching progress.
Right?
White, live in the suburbs, hate their parents. Yeah. What did you say? What was the word they used for it?
Exoticizing. I think,
Exoticizing.
what they said, yeah.
Oh my God, that is so adorable. Exoticizing. I was talking to you about Rick Bayless, who's a famous chef of Mexican cuisine, who is a white man who adores Mexican food. I mean, I love the guy. I love listening to his videos. I love Mexican food. So watching this guy's videos, it's like I love someone who's really into something. You know, I get a kick out of even like there's a guy I used to watch on PBS that would make furniture with ancient tools. Like he'd use like ancient different old-timey saws and chisels and shit, and he would make these wooden chairs and tables and furniture.
It's called the Amish, right? I mean,
but he kind of looked like that. But he was really dressed like an old-timey guy, and he had this old-timey shop, and he would make this stuff. And I loved watching him. And I don't give a fuck about his shitty furniture. I don't. But what I cared about was the fact that this guy was really passionate about his thing, and it was very attractive to me. And I feel the same way when I watch this guy, Rick Bayless, talk about Mexican cuisine. He loves it. He takes regular trips to Mexico and learns how to cook these dishes in the traditional way, and then he talks about it with this great passion. But the guy just got shit all over. They were just like, you're culturally appropriating. You shouldn't be doing this. You're a white man.
Let me just say this generally. Cultural appropriation is a bunch of horseshit. And the reason it's a bunch of horseshit is because, you know what's the best in life? All the things that are good from everybody else's culture. Like, the reason people live in major cities is to go to all the different restaurants from all of the different cultures. Like, why is cultural... I'm so confused as to why cultural appropriation is bad. Cultural appropriation is the greatest thing that has ever happened to planet Earth. If we were all siloed off into our own little cultures, you know how much things would suck? It would just be terrible. So this kind of stuff is just crazy.
Drives me nuts. I grew up teaching Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art. I learned to count in Korean. I had to speak all the techniques in Korean.
Because you hate Koreans. That's clearly. I mean,
I am a globo homo, as they say, or a globalist cuck. So I have a different kind of opinion on cultural appropriation than most other people on the left and liberals. And that is that I'm a product of American assimilation to some degree. For me, I enjoy degeneracy, hedonism. I enjoy the merger of cultures. I just... This is the type of shit that literally makes Ben Shabibo look like he's smart and on the right side, because I think that in a lot of instances, the left looks ridiculous when they engage in this sort of overcorrective behavior. Now, that doesn't That's not for everybody, okay? That's not for every single instance. For example, if black people are still being prosecuted or persecuted for having cornrows, and then white people are being celebrated for wearing cornrows, that's a little different, okay? That's a little different. I don't even think that blackface is cultural appropriation. It's beyond that, obviously. So that's an entirely different circumstance, especially considering the factors, the historical context of blackface. That's just racist. What I am frustrated by, where I draw the line on cultural appropriation is, and this really frustrates people when I say this, is that I am a food fascist. If you make a sushi burrito, you should go to jail. Sorry, that's it. That's my take. You go to jail. No fucking fusion cuisine unless it's done very well. And in that circumstance, I am the one who decides what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. Those are the rules. Those are the rules that I fucking made. Sorry. No sushiritos.
And that's clearly the problem here.
I culturally appropriated the shit out of my childhood.
Yeah, exactly. This is all crazy, and there's no apparent end to it. Like, there's no limiting principle.
There's no limit. There's no limit.
I read a column this morning by somebody, I think it was in the Washington Post, saying that we should just keep changing the name of everything. Like, literally, forever. We should just keep changing the name of everything. She said, there was this town, and I think I found a non-offensive name for the town, but if I found something else that was offensive, like 3 years from now, we should change the name of the town. I just thought, okay, so we are living in 1984, right? Orwell talked about renaming everything.
Man, people will find a way.
1984, written by a fucking democratic socialist like George Orwell, was actually indicative of what is happening right now, but in the exact opposite way that Ben Shapiro and others believe is happening. 1984 is the Harry Potter of conservatives on the internet, okay? Read a different book. As a matter of fact, read that book first, because you don't even understand what the fuck was going on in that book. You didn't get the message there. Like, we have actual fascist paramilitary in unmarked vans ripping fucking people off the streets and detaining them unconstitutionally, which Ben Shapiro has defended on Twitter, like literally yesterday. And then this cocksucker thinks he can make an argument about 1984. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? Why the fuck do these psychopaths think 1984 is about like blue-haired SJW college freshmen, dude?
Hey, they'll find a way to be mad.
Well, here's my controversial statement, okay?
Okay.
My controversial statement is, if you have to go this far to find things to be offended over, there's not that much to be offended over. If you have to go so far that you have to be offended by Trader Jose's, you got nothing going on in your life. There's a dramatic demand for being offended and acting like a victim. And there just ain't, like, there are actual victims in this country.
Yes.
And internationally, they're seriously actual victims.
Yes.
But we don't focus on any of those folks, right?
No.
We focus instead.
Yeah, the actual victims in this country, like conservatives. Yeah, there are actual victims in this fucking country. And Ben Shapiro is right. We don't focus on them. Largely because people like Ben Shapiro keep fucking redirecting the conversation to other shit that is completely nonsensical, like Trader Joe's renaming Trader Jose's as a fucking brand. I hate this. I hate this so much.
Like the dumbest bullcrap you ever heard. About renaming libraries. And listen, I'm fine with, you want to take a Confederate statue and put it in a museum? Fine. I mean, those guys were jerks. They're terrible people. Fine, go for it. But like, you're talking about, we're going to fix the world by renaming Washington, D.C. because Washington was bad. It's like, what did you do lately? Did you do what Washington did? Like, I understand we don't put up statues to people for all the bad crap.
No, thank God that fucking no one right now, at least to my knowledge, is doing what Washington did, which is, have slaves. So that was pretty bad.
You don't love the spirit of
remember,
justice.
Ben Shapiro the other day was on Fox News getting upset at 64% of black people who felt conflicted about George Washington's legacy. And he was like, I don't understand. You guys are being ridiculous. Why are you upset at a man who literally enslaved you? I totally get why people would be upset at George Washington. I personally am, again, in a different category as far as like renaming monuments to George Washington or like taking down monuments to George Washington. I feel like if your contributions are larger than exclusively the defense of slavery or larger than like literally just doing genocide in Christopher Columbus's case, like, then in that circumstance, especially for social cohesion, which is still a necessity for nation building in the absence of a complete abolition of states at the international level, then yeah, that kind of fucking cohesiveness and that kind of cohesion, that kind of social cohesion is a necessary part of fucking nation building. So I don't have a problem with fucking Washington statues and shit, but I also think that history books should reflect George Washington and the genocide that he engaged in appropriately. He did that. History books should absolutely show that not only did George Washington have slaves, but he knew it was bad. And not only did he know it was bad, other people around him knew it was bad, and he still did it. Not good. Not good by any day's standards. Not good by today's standards. Not good by yesterday's standards. Not good. Sorry, it's the fucking truth. All right, let's keep going.
They did. Martin Luther King had a real bad record with ladies. Okay, we don't put up statues to Martin Luther King because we were saying he was great with women.
I think everybody was bad with women.
Again, MLK did not own slaves or rape slaves. Having a bad record with the ladies is a psychotic reason to take down someone's statue. When leftists engaged in this same exact argument for Frederick Douglass, it was a small subsect of activists
me and lied.
and a small subsect of academics who were talking about how Frederick Douglass left his first wife, who was black, for a white abolitionist woman. And they were fucking talking about how that sucks and how that's terrible and whatever, and he's no good. And, you know, there is some truth to black women being eliminated from the conversation in abolition, right? There is a statement there to be made about that for sure. But neither of which is the same as genocide and having slaves. And I don't even believe that we should be taking down statues of fucking George Washington either, by the way. So silly to make this comparison to MLK. Not the same severity as owning fucking slaves, okay?
Back then.
Everyone is bad, period. Human beings suck. Okay, so either get rid of all the statues or recognize that human beings suck.
Worse, obviously.
For sure. And there are gradations of suck. But
do you remember back when they were tearing down those Civil War statues and Trump, in all of his wisdom, was like, what are they going to do next? What about Lincoln? What about they're going to take down George Washington? And everybody's like, oh, he's so crazy. Meanwhile, that's exactly what they were doing.
See?
That was what they were doing. In Chicago, well, that was actually Christopher Columbus, who was legitimately a bad guy.
he was, I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Also, everyone was bad. Like, literally all the people.
No, not to this degree. You can't say everyone was literally cutting off the hands of indigenous populations and engaging in mass rape. Like, then everyone is bad. Then, you know, Hitler's bad, but everyone was bad. Well, Churchill did genocide too. Are they the same? You're fucking crazy. That's a crazy argument. No.
Like enslavement, brutal treatment of people.
Right.
Fairly commonplace.
Do you think there's an argument to be said that maybe we shouldn't celebrate those bad people anymore, that we know what they really were?
Not really.
About?
I think we should just talk about the bad people. Like, I don't think we're the only good people in history.
Right.
I think
they should have a statue of Genghis Khan.
I don't know. What did Genghis Khan do that was good, that had good results?
Well, he opened up trade to China.
Okay, if you want to put up a trade to China.
Technically, the real argument here is that it's very difficult to apply normative positions to matters that pertain to history. Okay? It's very difficult. Also, based ass fucking take. Pro Genghis Khan takes only here. Okay? This is a Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan stream, brothers and sisters. So, the reality here is that while Genghis Khan was insanely brutal, because of the fact that 700 fucking years have passed, but pretty much like the only reason why we don't think about Genghis Khan as a brutal person is because of how long it has been.
A statue for Genghis Khan at the Trade Federation.
10% of the population.
Yeah, true enough. And what? Impregnated the other 10% or something.
I don't have a problem with
everybody. He literally raped his way through Asia.
The point of a Christopher Columbus statue is not all the...
And everybody fucking knows. Everybody fucking knows what Genghis Khan did. Absolutely everybody knows what the fuck Genghis Khan did. Literally, the only thing that most people know about Christopher Columbus is the whitewash history of Columbus. Columbus's peers at the time and people that were responsible for him did not think what he was doing was good.
The bad things he did to the Arawaks. The point of a Christopher Columbus statue is we are glad that Western civilization came to the Western Hemisphere. I kind of agree with that principle. I think it is a good thing that Western civilization came to the Western Hemisphere. And yes, there was a lot of brutality. And yes, there was a lot of cruelty. And we should talk about all those things. But this notion that the only cruelty that has ever existed in human history came at the behest of Western civilization, that everything was a Rousseauian paradise before Christopher Columbus came, that Christopher Columbus doesn't deserve a statue in specific, that we should, like, either make the argument that everybody was a product of their time and therefore no one deserves a statue, or recognize that when there's a statue of Christopher Columbus, we are not honoring how he treated the Arawaks. No one ever thought that we'd put up a statue to Christopher Columbus because he was really sweet to the natives on the other end of that. Right, that nobody's.
So, what is the purpose of a statue? Like when you have a Christopher Columbus statue, like what is the purpose of that statue?
This is actually a good question to ask, and the answer is literally to whitewash his history. All matter of hagiography, to some degree, engage in this because you are celebrating a person when you make a fucking glorified statue of them. So, obviously, you can make that same argument for George Washington as well. But the counterpoint to that, on my end at least, is the fact that there is some form of social cohesion that is a necessity. Okay? So I don't have that big of a problem with it. I also think it's unhelpful politically. If you want to fucking take down the American government and decolonize the United States in its entirety, and then you take down fucking statues, then that's a celebration. Okay? As a celebration of a political move. But if your entire fucking movement is revolving around taking down George Washington statues, then you're just fucking owning yourself, okay? Because you're not going to get anyone on board with that mentality.
We all know who he is. We all know what he did. Why do we have an enormous bronze version of him in the middle of a park?
I mean, presumably to say that Western civilization arriving here was a good thing, right? Or to have the conversation. I mean, that's
it's a monument to an historical event, right?
Right. Or listen, Columbia University is named after Columbus, right? The idea of America as Columbia, right, which was an alternative name for America, was after Columbus because he was a discoverer.
Well, that's a weird one, right? We're named after Amerigo Vespucci, who nobody knows who the fuck that guy is.
Yeah, he's been lost in the time.
He's totally been lost.
But there is this idea that has settled in that and it's really of high irritation to me that we are now the only good people who have ever lived. Everyone who came before us was just a horrible person, and we are the only good humans who have ever, isn't the world lucky to have us? We're the only people who have ever lived who are completely sinless, and we can look from our perch at the top of morality at everyone who came before us and say that those people were all garbage compared to us. Now, there were people who were garbage compared to us, but
I like this argument because, no, obviously, we are still garbage, and the same people that are, I know he's memeing right now, but the same people that are making that argument about statues are literally making the argument that we're still garbage and we should make everything better.
I really don't think that Washington was among the people who you can say was garbage compared to you. I don't think that you living in 1770 are a better person than George Washington. I think you stand atop the legacy that George Washington helped build.
So, love the spirit of justice.
This is a fucking idiotic argument. Just because we are still currently bad does not mean that we should whitewash really horrific things that others have done before us. I mean, it's a bad argument, but it's a successful one, and it's a deliberate one. Why is it a deliberate one? Because if you deny systemic racism as a part of your job, then you can also justify slavery that preceded it, okay? The actions of our founding fathers and the legacy of systemic racism stems from slavery. So that is just a longer way to beef up your argument that systemic racism does not exist. Ben Shapiro comments on the growing distrust of the police.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Now, what do you do when you look at the way people distrust the police now? In particular, I mean, I've been reading stories about cops go into Five
You
Guys
have attacked
burgers and
me
they
and
can't get
lied.
served because people won't
Yep.
serve cops. And this idea that all cops are bad. And this is a very, really disturbing perspective to me because you're seeing what's happening right now in Chicago. You're seeing what's happening right
don't
now
love
in New
the
York,
spirit
where you
of
have this
justice.
massive
You love
uptick
your
in
father,
violent
the
crime
devil.
because it's perceived that the police presence has been diminished greatly. So how do you reaffirm the trust in law enforcement, and what do you do to reform law enforcement? Because clearly there are some people that are cops that should not be cops.
Yes, there are a few things that you can do right off the bat and that people right, left, and center have sort of talked about. And one of them is that you can abridge qualified immunity in certain areas. So qualified immunity is the idea that you're not liable to civil suit if you don't do something bad that has specifically had a precedent in law. So you could do something bad, but as long as nobody else has done the same exact bad thing before, you're not subjected to civil liability. You could curb that.
Explain that again.
It's a little complicated. So qualified immunity generally means that if I do something bad, then as a police officer, if I act within the scope of my general reasonable authority, you can't sue me for it. The actual way
If
that
you do something bad, what if you shoot somebody while you're operating?
Right. So the reason that qualified immunity, as currently understood under Supreme Court doctrine, is too broad, is because that the standard used to be you would have to act as a reasonable police officer. If you acted as a reasonable police officer and you took a reasonable action, right? Somebody went for their waistband, they had an object in there, you didn't know if it was a gun, you shot them, right? You wouldn't presumably be suable because that's still reasonable. You track a guy down, you shoot him in the back, you know, and then you plant a gun on him, that presumably would be suable, right? He'd be personally
I
liable.
understand what you're
So
saying.
the way that Supreme Court has done this is they broaden qualified immunity to such an extent that you can still, bottom line is you can still get away with some bad stuff and not be sued for it. So that needs to be curbed. That's one thing. Second, police union contracts need to be utterly redone across the country. Police union contracts right now protect a lot of bad cops, right? But because the police unions are designed to protect the members.
I hate that I agree with Ben Shapiro on literally everything,
You don't
even
love
though
the spirit of justice.
his take on
You love your
anti-unions
father, the
is across the board. He just like doesn't like unions. And I mean, it's been 2 minutes and 18 seconds and he hasn't said anything wrong so far. It sucks, but it's the truth.
The members of the union, just like any other union.
Yeah.
And so what that means is that police unions, I'm not a fan of public sector unions generally, but police unions need to be abridged in their ability to protect cops who do something wrong. Third, you need to have a national registry of cops who are disciplined for violation of procedure so that they can't just leave LAPD and then go work for a Ferguson PD or something. Right? Those are some easy things that you could do right off the bat. But the biggest thing right now, the biggest factor in terms of lack of faith between police and citizens really is the media, because there's been a lot of talk about the
Ben Shapiro, handshake emoji, my Uncle Cenk Uyghur, abolition of unions.
racial constituency of police forces. The majority of the LAPD is minority. The majority of the Baltimore PD is minority. I believe that a huge percentage of the Chicago PD is minority. So it really is not about, lots of white cops in black neighborhoods. In Baltimore, it's a lot of black cops in black neighborhoods. And that has not solved the problem of people mistrusting the police on an endemic level.
Okay, technically they do have a union now, so suck my dick. By the way, they do. There is a union now at the UIT.
Well, it's an inherently difficult job.
It's a rotten job, man. I mean, I have nothing but for good cops. They're heroes, and the vast majority of cops are good cops, and they're heroes.
Yeah, I read a meme the other day that's very accurate. It said,
I read
if
a
you
meme?
have 130 good cops and 12 cops, or 12 cops that are bad, you have 12 bad cops. If you have 130 good cops and 12 bad cops, but the 130 won't do anything about the 12 bad cops, you've got 142 bad cops.
Yeah.
Wow. What is happening in this conversation? I'm losing my mind, dude. What the fuck? Dude, if a leftist or a liberal made this argument, Ben Shapiro would be like, actually, that's a logical fallacy.
And I think that
Also, this is why I always tell you guys to do those despicable memes to like combat against your parents getting brainwashed by like QAnon shit, because like memetics is the best way to directly fucking laser target your opinions, to directly just fucking laser in your opinions into the dome of your dumbass parents. Okay, this is what works. It sucks, but it's the truth.
that's right.
Yeah, I think that's right, too.
I think that it is also true that our standard of what constitutes a bad cop has in some ways become much more stringent. So, for example, there are cases that have become national stories in which a cop was labeled a bad cop and he wasn't a bad cop.
Right, but there are
Right.
bad cops.
For sure.
Look. Here's a great example. The cops that pushed down that old man in where was it? Buffalo, New York? Is that
Yep,
where it was?
Yep. Cracked his skull. Yep.
That's fucking crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's white on white crime, right? I mean, is a white guy pushes this old man down, and the most bonkers part about that was the way the president reacted. Like, oh, the way he felt seemed funny. Maybe he was Antifa.
Yeah.
Maybe he was undercover.
You
Like,
don't love
it was
the spirit of
literally
justice.
the worst
love your
possible
father, the
reaction
devil.
to watching an elderly senior citizen get pushed down by a young, strong man.
You mean President Trump had the worst
It
possible
was
reaction to a
the
thing?
worst
To a thing? I can't believe
possible
it.
Reaction. Yeah, I mean,
Unknown.
there's-
President Trump having bad reactions to
look,
things.
I'm a big supporter of law enforcement. I have a lot of friends that are cops. I know a lot of people from martial arts that are cops from the UFC. I know a lot of cops from jiu-jitsu. I knew a lot of cops growing up.
This further proves my cop phrenology cop skull argument, because Joe Rogan has a cop skull. He just does. He has a cop skull, and that's why he's around other cops who also probably have cop skulls. The only kind of craniology or phrenology you can do is a cop skull science.
Up from all the different martial arts disciplines that I engage in, a lot of cops get involved in that. There's a lot of good cops. There's a lot of good people out there, but it is a fucking insane job, and so many of them have PTSD.
For sure. But I will say that one of the great myths is that the big threat to the black community in the United States is law enforcement. It's just nonsense. It's not only nonsense, it's counterproductive nonsense. And you're seeing it.
But it is a
I love this. No, it's totally a myth, dude. The criminal justice system is just working as intended. And this is where Ben Shapiro turns around and starts making 1350 memes about how justified it is that the criminal justice system churns out it turns out these totally disproportionate outcomes by race, regardless of the fact that there is plenty of empirical evidence that shows, even when adjusted for every single other factor, including socioeconomic conditions, black people are still getting longer sentences and getting worse terms for the same fucking crimes as white people. How do you describe that with a 1350, Ben?
Play out.
threat. It is a threat
It
oftentimes.
is on a data level an extraordinarily small threat. Law enforcement as a threat to black life on a generalized level is extraordinarily small. The Washington Post database last year showed a grand total of 15 black Americans shot on.
Yes. Yes. The only problem with police brutality is police killing unarmed people. Every other circumstance where they beat the shit out of people, where they lock people inappropriately, detain them inappropriately, handcuff them, escalate in violent uses, engage in violent escalation, engage in a use of force that is totally disproportionate. Every single one of those circumstances, all of those circumstances are all of a sudden completely thrown in the dark, and it's just 15 people that got killed by cops. 15 people that got killed by cops that were unarmed. Very cool. Thank you, Ben Shapiro. I did not realize that is the only instance. I didn't realize that police brutality was just when you get murdered. You know what I mean?
Unarmed across the United States in a country of 42 million black people.
The problem is when it happens, it doesn't matter what the statistics are. If people see that
that's
video
it.
and that video gets shared 200 million times, it looks like there's 200 million.
This is like if someone turned around and said anti-Semitism is not that big of a deal. Only 13 people died at that fucking synagogue. That would be a psychotic and actually very anti-Semitic argument to make. Okay? That would be a totally fucking anti-Semitic argument to make. And Ben Shapiro would laser focus on that and know exactly how devastating that argument is. Anti-Semitism isn't just about fucking... anti-Semitism isn't just about fucking the 13 Jewish people that died in a fucking synagogue. It's so much more than that. Just like police brutality is so much more than the 15 unarmed black people that got killed by cops.
million white cops killing a black guy.
Well, and this is why I say that the media's treatment of this stuff is just horrific.
It's not just the media; it's social media.
Social media has blown this stuff up, and it's gotten to the point where if you say that's a horrible situation, that's also an anecdotal situation. Here's some data. If you present the data, it's like, well, are you ignoring people's lived experiences? That's racist. How can you present the data? The data doesn't take into account the full story. No, but it takes into account an awful lot of the story, which is why it's called data, right? Like, I just don't. Anecdotal evidence is evidence of an anecdote. It is not evidence of a broad national trend, nor is it evidence that taking a broad national policy like cutting back funding.
So what is it? What is it when you like anecdotes aren't important. He is right about that. Except, what about cherry picking data points to minimize the impact of a much broader systemic issue that has plenty of fucking empirical evidence to show the disproportionate outcomes that really harm black people at a disproportionate level? What is that then? Like, sure, anecdotes are not a substitute for actual fucking evidence, but you constantly bastardize the research by citing facts without any sort of context whatsoever in order to take advantage of the very real inefficiency that human beings have, because they can't look at qualitative or quantitative analysis when you bring up a fucking data point, and they immediately assume that correlation equals causation. So you can totally fucking muddy the water with data, just like he has done with that viral tweet that he blasted out the other day, showing a heat map of mask wearers versus a heat map of coronavirus cases, and then only correcting himself later, like, oh my God, I didn't mean that, like, masks are increasing the likelihood that you have coronavirus. I just wanted to put this out there. Like, no, it's just a fucking heat map of population density. That's exactly what you were doing. That is taking advantage of the fact that human beings assume correlation is causation. That's what you're doing. That's not data. You are not engaging in, like, meta-analysis. You are not looking at data appropriately. You are just using one fucking fact without any sort of, and robbing it of any sort of context whatsoever, any sort of meaningful context whatsoever to justify a talking point. That's not how you use data. That's only how you use data if you're a piece of shit.
Funding to the police in a time of rising crime is a good idea because you saw a video on YouTube.
Well, I think we both agree that's a terrible idea. But when you look at these videos, the positive side, if there is any positive side, is that they're accountable now. And this has been going on forever. If you talk to people that are black that grew up in poverty-stricken areas, they will tell you horrific stories about being abused by cops. And I think the number is like 25% more likely a black person or brown person getting any sort of interaction with a cop is 25% more likely to become physical or for them to be abused. That's real. I mean, when you look at the statistics of them being killed, yeah, white people get killed more by cops than black people. But there's way more white people.
No, even on a percentage basis, you have to use the control group of crime. You can't use the control group of raw population. So you have to look at people who are in situations where a deadly interaction is likely. There have been multiple studies that show that black people are not in more danger of being shot by cops than white people. But it is true that low-level uses of force between cops and black people are worse than low-level uses of force between cops and white people, right? That's the Roland Fryer study. There are a few confounds that have yet to be sort of worked out.
I think probably white people are less likely to believe that the cop's going to kill them, whereas black people are probably convinced the cop's going to kill them. That might play a factor in why there's more white people being killed by cops.
I mean, that may very well be true. It may also be that low-level uses of force.
What? Or maybe there's like 5 times more white people, dude. What a fucking brain dead convo. If Ben Shapiro was an honest person, he would turn around and be like, yeah, the reason why more white people get killed by cops is because there's more white people. He said that? Oh, Rogan said that and Shapiro deflected on it. Oh, I didn't even hear Rogan say that. What the fuck? Wait, why is he now then turning around and being like, maybe white people don't think that Wait, why? What did
studies
I
that
miss?
show that not in more danger of being shot by cops than white people. But it is true that low-level uses of force between cops and black people are worse than low-level uses of force
Yes.
between cops and white people, right? That's the Roland Fryer study. There are a few confounds that have yet to be sort of worked out.
I think probably white people are less likely to believe that the cop's going to kill them, whereas black people are probably convinced the cop's going to kill them.
Okay, I don't care. Okay, I trust you. Yeah, he said more white people than black people.
That might play a factor in why there's more white people being killed by cops.
I mean,
than
that
black
may
people.
very well be true. It may also be that low-level uses of force may be disparate. If you think that the cop's likely to be a racist, then you might be more likely to resist the cop, and then he might be more likely to rough you up. So it's very difficult to rub out the confounds there. The one thing that we know for sure is that the greatest threat to black life, just like the greatest threat to white life.
Okay, so here's the counter to that, by the way. The counter to the 1350, the easiest counter is, okay, men disproportionately cause all crimes. Is your advocacy then to just immediately assume all men are literally in the process of committing crimes all the time, nonstop? It's the overwhelming majority. Men are all criminals. Ben Shapiro is literally making a men are trash argument here whenever he says, well, 1350, okay? I say another one that's a little bit more insensitive that you can, if you really want to trigger, especially if you're talking to a fucking fragile-ass white person about this, one that you can use is, okay, well, white kids make up the overwhelming majority of school shooters. We should ban white kids, or we should really focus on white kids going to school. I mean, they literally all of them are school shooters. What the fuck? You don't work that way. No one ever adjudicates in this capacity. No one ever looks at white people, or no one ever looks at men across the board, because we apply nuance in that circumstance. But when you are from a marginalized background, if you are a black person, then all of a sudden it's very easy to make those monolithic arguments that justify that black people need additional attention by the police force and that their communities need to be over-policed because black people are responsible for an overwhelming majority of crime. Just always own them. Just always own your opponent by saying, well, okay, over-police men then. All men are always criminal across the board. They are responsible for the overwhelming majority of crimes. Then you can follow through by saying, well, white men make up an outsized percentage of the pedophiles. White men are all pedophiles across the board. White men are all school shooters and pedophile rapists. So, sorry, you made the rules. This is what we need to do. And serial killers. Ooh, forgot about that one. Serial killers as well. Always use that counter. It's so fucking easy.
Life is members of your own race killing you. Like if you're talking about actual murders, white people are killed by white people. Black people are killed by black people.
By people you know, mostly.
Right. It's intraracial, right? There's very little interracial crime, like black on white or white on black in the United States. There's a lot of intraracial crime, so a lot of white people victimizing white people and black people victimizing black people. And the question is, how do you stop that? This is why, I don't know if you saw this interview. It was kind of an amazing interview. Terry Crews, the actor.
Yes.
He was on with Don Lemon.
Don Lemon.
Right.
Yeah.
And Don Lemon is doing the Black Lives Matter sloganing, and Terry Crews says, well, all lives matter. And Don Lemon says, but no, Black Lives Matter doesn't mean all Black Lives Matter. Right? But Terry Crews said all Black Lives Matter. And he said, no, not all Black Lives Matter. Only Black Lives Matter. We're only talking about police brutality right now. And Terry Crews was like, well, why aren't we talking?
Okay, I can't believe we're about to do this again. But Black Lives Matter means Black lives don't matter right now, and all lives can't matter until Black Lives matter, because Black lives are a part of all lives. There you go.
Talking about all Black Lives Matter, because if Black Lives Matter means you withdraw cops, and withdrawing cops means more dead black people, then why wouldn't those lives matter too? And this is where the sloganeering gets in the way of actual progress, because
it's where ideology hits facts.
Right, exactly.
It gets very weird. And Terry Crews was called some terrible names for that, but then a video surfaced of Don.
Okay. The problem with Terry Crews in that circumstance is if you're using all lives matter as a counterpoint to Black Lives Matter, what you're pretty much saying is that, no, you're wrong. Like, everyone is getting oppressed equally, and your point that like black people are being oppressed specifically or have a higher likelihood to be brutalized by police is not true. That's it. then you're just standing in counter to the message. You are not a part of that movement. Like, you can't do that.
On Lemon from
You don't
2013.
love
Also,
the spirit of justice.
not to
You
do
love
a
your
callback
father,
here
the
to
devil.
what Ben Shapiro did earlier, but is Terry Crews an expert?
You don't love the spirit of justice.
It seems like only
You
people
love
that agree
your
with me
father,
when they're
the
black are
devil.
experts on police
Check if you
brutality,
know
but
you can
when it's Colin
subscribe for
Kaepernick,
free
he's
with
not an
Twitch
expert on
Prime.
police brutality, but when it's Terry Crews who agrees with me, then he's an expert, and I will use him as an example. That's weird. Great.
Chastising black
Sounds like
people.
me on that, right? He sounds like me talking
He
about.
sounds exactly like you. It's hilarious. Pull your pants up. Get your shit together.
This shit. This is why I got fucking clowned on, dude. Joe Rogan, please exercise some fucking reflection, dude. Please, motherfucker. Please.
There, you know, like
He's literally saying things like, don't have babies out of wedlock,
Yes.
right? Stay in school. Right? Which, by the way, again, all of this is commonsensical and true for all races. It is not just black people. Young white people in Appalachia
Yeah.
need to get their shit together.
Yes.
Everybody needs to get their shit together.
But again, young white people in Appalachia are dealing with the same thing. What's around them all the time is crime, people taking pills, everyone having babies out of wedlock, people impoverished, no hope, no potential for escape.
Again, the question in this circumstance that they will never ask is why? Why are people having children out of wedlock? Why are people in desolate conditions, including the white people in Appalachia? Why? What could it be? Is it because people are bad? Is it because some people are bad and some people are good? Ben Shapiro says it's because people don't take individual responsibility. It's not. It's systemic problems. It is the socioeconomic conditions. I'll say it, material conditions if you want. That's it. People don't want to fucking live a life of crime, dude. They're forced into it. They're forced
You
into it when
don't
they
love the
have
spirit of
no
justice.
other opportunity.
You love your father,
Okay?
the devil.
That's it.
Another one.
Okay, that's another one down. God damn, there's so many good things. Are we done with Ben yet? Fuck no, dude. There's still so much goodness. Changing the system doesn't change human nature. Dude, this is honestly a textbook on like conservative. This is honestly a textbook on like how conservatives argue. Literally all of these are just conservative argumentation. 4-minute one. Let's take this is
The
a
Joe
quick one.
Rogan Experience.
Every single generation, hopefully, if society doesn't implode, we don't have nuclear war, every single generation is going to learn from the mistakes of the past and hopefully improve. That's what we're hoping for. And we should be happy that we can look back on a lot of these people and say, we understand now how deeply flawed they were and what was wrong with George Washington or what was wrong with Thomas Jefferson. Although he did, draft the Declaration of Independence, he was a slave owner. And this is one of the contradictions of our society and our culture. That
and fathered kids with a
Yes,
slave. I mean,
yes,
yes.
yes.
I mean, you don't have to shortchange the
Yes.
evils of human beings in order to recognize either the direction of American history or recognize the good things
Yes.
about people. People are a little more complex than I think we want to think of them
Yes,
as. And
yeah.
and this is one of the arenas that this sort of gets back to the point about the system. If you
Fathered kids with a slave is a really interesting way of saying that he raped a 14-year-old slave of his that he owned. And this is, by the way, like a super liberal thing. Like, this is something that they get mad at liberals on, right? Like that they're using like snowflake language. Just say what it is, Shapiro.
recognize that human beings are capable of great sin and also capable of doing great things, what you really want is a system that of checks and balances that prevents people from gaining too much power to hurt other people. And what you also want to recognize is that the flaws of human beings are not necessarily the flaws of the system, and that just changing the system is not going to change the underlying flaws of human beings, which means you actually have to think through the policies that you're promulgating before you implement them.
Clearly, if you say that.
Yeah, which is why we should still have slavery, which is why we should have no laws whatsoever, because we will never prevail over our barbaric ways. It's just embedded in our nature. It's embedded in our human nature. Oh, wait, we literally fucking did that for everything. That's why an appeal to nature is a very common logical fallacy that people engage in. Conservatives love to engage in that. unless Ben Shapiro is Kaczynski posting right here and saying we must return to a prehistoric non-industrial society, unless we need to fucking live as anarcho-primitivists, I don't want to hear the rest of this take because it's fucking dumb.
You're not paying attention to what happened at Chaz or Chop, because they had it nailed. It was paradise for a short period of time. That's one of my favorite stories of this year, because these people basically took over this gigantic chunk of Seattle and said, we're going to show you how it's done. They wind up being the police. They wind up beating the fuck out of people who did anything they didn't want them to do, including film things. They wind up, you saw murder. You saw massive graffiti. You certainly saw borders. There were borders put up. They kept cops from coming in. They kept a lot of people from coming in.
Beating up journalists.
Beat up journalists. They took over private property. So they appropriated private property. These are not buildings they built. They didn't make a deal. They didn't barter. They didn't have some sort of a beautiful, mutually beneficial agreement with these people that own these buildings. No, fuck you. They took them over. They took them over and started spray painting shit all over them. It's crazy. But it shows you, like, your childlike idea of what you can do that's better. You don't really understand that the founding fathers really did put into place all these checks and balances to keep someone from abusing power. And as much as Trump would like to overcome all of that,
what's that I hear?
Time and time again. He's a great example.
What's that I hear?
Of how the system really is beautifully engineered from 300 fucking years ago.
Because the founders did understand the problem of human nature, which is people want power and they want to hurt other people very often. And you still need government in order to do things, but there better be broad-scale agreement on the things you want to do, or a small majority of people can really hurt a huge minority of people. That's what they call tyranny of the mob. They were much afraid of this. And that's stuff that is worth remembering. You know, the tearing down that system because you want to build something more beautiful, if it looks like Chaz or Chop, that ain't a thing.
What's this idealistic, they have blinders on. They have this narrow tunnel vision view of what they think this utopian future could be.
I think they think that human beings are going to be fundamentally transformed by a different system.
Yeah.
So they look at the problems. One of the biggest problems we have in American politics is the myopia with which we look at the United States. So when you're dating somebody, it's very easy to see.
That's definitely the biggest problem in American politics. Thank you, Ben, for fucking identifying it, dude. You laser focus on all the right criticisms, dude. Honestly, the biggest problem is that we don't suck America's cock enough, okay? I'm talking, I fuck the flag every night before I go to sleep. And honestly, you should too. And the real problem is, it's not like white supremacy and its legacy that permeates through all of our institutions. It's not capitalism and its inherently oppressive nature, the inherent contradictions within capitalism between the working class and the bourgeois society that we have developed. It is the fact that we don't fuck the flag enough. And that's why I need to fuck the flag, and you do too. Thank you, Ben. That's the problem. Also, I love this notion that, like, you know, the founding fathers were above criticism while simultaneously a bunch of fucking, like, 18-year-old teeny bopper anarchists that sustained protests in an area of Seattle in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone were of course magnitudes worse, and that it's just a part of human nature that every project is going to fail always. And anarchism is the only kind of leftist project. There is no other leftist project that could ever exist. Every other leftist project has always been a fucking disaster for no reason, just because of the fact that it just sucks, because communism is just bad inherently. Okay, socialism is just bad inherently. Let's not talk about the social democracies. Let's not talk about any sort of reformist movements that have at least slowly but surely been able to, in individual nations, been able to eliminate some of the problems that we here in America still experience on a daily basis. These are great arguments. Like, no government. It's only anarchists with no fucking experience in self-governance and all of the problems from Chaz and Chop. That's what the future liberals or leftists want.
All the problems with the person you're dating. When you're married to someone, it's certainly easy for my wife to see all the problems with me, and there are plenty. But when she looks at all the other people, then she's like, okay, well, he's less flawed than the others, right? When you look at the United States, it's very easy to see all the different flaws in the United States because, of course, they exist. This is a society filled with humans, 330 million of them. But when you look abroad and you look at other examples of civilizations over time, and then you look back at the United States, you think maybe the system isn't.
No journalist was ever beat. There's historically crime in that already neighborhood. That was why there was a precinct there. The business there saw massive profit increase from CHOP. I hate the narrative these people keep spewing about having been there. Plus, a bunch of right-wing agitators beat the absolute shit out of a dude for filming them, so what the fuck? The only problem with Chaz Chop is the very real problem that two fucking black teenagers were, who were, I guess, in that circumstance, trying to hurt people, were shot. One of them was fucking killed. I don't know if the other one was killed as well. But, like, when your utopian project ends up with, when your utopian project that was created as a sustained protest against fucking police extrajudiciously killing black people at a disproportionate rate, and then that project turns into you fucking killing a black teenager, then it's a failure and you have to admit it. As a leftist, I appreciate sustained protests like this, direct action. I don't immediately want to criticize it, but if your project ends up with a black dead teenager, then it's, you know, it's probably not an example of success. It's not a success story. That is literally what happened at CHOP.
Quite that bad. Because the fact is that for all the problems we got, the biggest problems that humanity faces and has faced are not happening in the United States. They're happening everywhere else. China right now is shipping Uyghur Muslims on trains after shaving their heads to concentration camps where they are being forcibly sterilized. There are actual problems on.
This is entirely different than, of course, what we've done in Guantanamo Bay, which I literally justified the other day. Real fascism is when Uyghur Muslims in China are getting shipped into concentration camps. Real fascism is never what the American government does or the American state does to Muslims in a nearly identical capacity. That's actually good. Ben Shapiro acting like he loves Muslims in this circumstance is hilarious. Is what the Chinese state doing to Uyghur Muslims much worse in magnitude than what the United States does domestically? Certainly. But what Ben Shapiro, who also defends Israel's human rights abuses against the Muslim population of Palestine, or what the United States does to Iraqis and 7 other Muslim nations, predominantly Muslim nations that we are currently engaged in war with, is hilarious when he is simply virtue signaling about China. It's just a China bad. When China does it, it's bad. But when we do it, it's fucking pretty tight. And I love it.
Planet Earth. That is not to say there aren't problems in the United States, but they are not the same in terms of degree, and they are not the same in terms of scope. And to pretend that the system of the United States needs to be ripped down from the inside, and that if you build a beautiful new system, that you will shape humanity such that we are all saints and no sinners, you're out of your mind.
This was a worthless video. The nature fallacy is dumb as fuck. Ben Shapiro forecast 2020 election. Let's see what he has to say about this. These are getting shorter, thank God.
We don't have much time. You have a heart out in 1 minute. I just want to know, what do you think goes down in November? And how hopeful are you for the future? Because it seems to me like we're fucked no matter who wins. Because the chaos that we're seeing, the civil unrest that we're seeing, it's going to either accelerate or spread one way or the other.
So I think that if we're going to hold together, we have to make a decision. Either fundamentally the American system is good but flawed, and we need to work on the flaws within the system, or fundamentally the American system sucks and was rooted in slavery and bigotry, and we need to rip down the entire system. The latter is not really a great recipe. So we can have normal political arguments within the former, or the country is toast. As far as what goes down in November, look, right now the polling data says Trump gets skunked. I mean, right now the polling data's got Biden up 10, 12 points in the polls.
But didn't the polling data in 2016 say that Hillary was going to steamroll?
On the national data, not so. On the national data, they were kind of right. So on the national data, the final Real Clear Politics poll average was like 3 points. Hillary won by 3 points in the popular vote. The state polls were really wrong, particularly in Wisconsin, in Michigan, and Pennsylvania. On this one, because Trump is universally losing in like all the swing states and is in spitting distance in Texas, he's got a lot of ground to make up right now. Listen, Biden is running almost the ideal campaign. He's not alive. He's a not alive person. And as it turns out, beating a dead horse is actually kind of tough, right? He's like, because he's not threatening. He's fundamentally non-threatening. You look at Biden, and do you feel threatened by Biden? I don't feel threatened by Biden. The man's not alive. You can't threaten me with a corpse, right? And so Trump, who is innately volatile and looking for something to kind of attack,
Is his own worst enemy.
Is his own worst enemy. Yeah. Like with Hillary, the untold story of 2016 is that Trump didn't win, Hillary lost. Yeah. People hated Hillary's guts. True. And the stat that proves it is that people who hated both Trump and Hillary broke for Trump pretty heavily. Yeah. Right now, people who don't like either Biden or Trump are breaking nearly universally for Biden because
also
Trump
true.
is so off-putting. And I've said for a long time, politics is about the art of making it hard to vote for your opponent and easy to vote for you. And Trump is fairly good at number one, and he is awful. He is god-awful at number two. Making it easy to vote for him, that's a toughie.
He's right. He's 100% right on that. He's done this a lot. Like he has done this a lot as far as his criticism of Trump. Ben Shapiro, for all of his glaring failures, has been relatively brutally honest when it comes to why he votes for Trump. At least I would say more honest than the Never Trump Republicans, which I think he was solidly a part of for some time. Like he'll just say it. He's like, I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like the aesthetics of Donald Trump, but ultimately it doesn't matter because he is pushing for policy positions that I agree with. That to me is infinitely more honest than like having fucking Ari Fleischer on MSNBC or all these other fucking dumbass Never Trump Republicans that were literally war criminals under the Bush administration. Anyway, Ben Shapiro on China's oppression of its Uyghur
The Joe Rogan
minority.
experience.
The Uyghur situation is shockingly undercovered.
Oh my God! Well, it demonstrates that when people said never again, they're full of crap. They're just full of crap. I mean, it's just not true.
It's
I mean, this is one area where the United
Dude, this is so crazy.
My point, but either way, hope
I think this is probably, as a Muslim myself, I think the most disgusting thing I hear from Ben Shapiro is this. Like the thing that honestly triggers the fuck out of me is when he sits there and acts like he gives a shit about fucking Muslims. Like it really fucks me up to see this dude who like personally has made a career by like literally writing about fucking atheists. I'm culturally Muslim, motherfucker. I come from a Muslim family. I grew up in a fucking 90% Muslim country.
You love
like,
your father.
I'm culturally Muslim in the same way that like most Americans say they're fucking Christian. All right? I do still very much defend everyone's right to fucking believe whatever the fuck they want to believe as long as they don't infringe on other people's rights by using religion as a justification for why people can't learn about fucking LGBT populations or whatever, whether it's Islam or Christianity, doesn't fucking matter. Suck my dick. Okay?
The United States should absolutely be taking a leading role. It is obvious that China is a nefarious actor. China has been stealing our technology. The Chinese government is attempting to extend its rule of tyranny.
This notion that China is stealing our intellectual property unironically makes me sound like a fucking dentist, but motherfucker won, dude. He won. I say this all the time on this broadcast now, but he won. He was fucking right. He was able to literally just fucking exploit the Chinese labor force for bargain, bottom of the barrel, bargain bin prices. And the contractual obligation on the American or the Western side was they get your intellectual property. Look no further than all of these bitch boy Americans crying about China stealing our intellectual property. Hey, here's a good thing you could have done. Are you ready? Here's one good thing you could have done if you wanted to avoid that. Don't move your fucking manufacturing to China in its entirety. You can't get mad that like the decisions that you allowed your corporations to make that were destructive for the West are now coming back to haunt you. You're just a fucking sore loser.
Over Hong Kong, they just subjected 7.5 million people to their direct tyranny and violation.
Such is the way of the free market, bitch. That's what I'm saying. I don't give a fuck if he's actually giving a shit about Muslims. He's highlighting the issue and giving awareness of the problem. No, he's not. Because these dudes are not going to actually advocate to stop this, okay? He's just using it as a fucking point. And it's really fucking frustrating to hear someone like this justify brutality against Muslims worldwide on a daily basis. Someone who's made a career off of this and using this as a talking point just to fucking dunk on China. There's plenty of reasons to dunk on China. This is one of them. It is a disaster of insane proportions that a dominating force on this planet is fucking shipping like an entire area, an entire region of fucking Muslims that they've locked down under complete mass surveillance into concentration camps, exploiting them, engaging in cultural genocide. It's totally fucked up. But if you're doing that for one end and you're not doing that for anything else, then you're just a fucking hypocrite. Liberals do this shit all the time. They turn a blind eye to the actual issues and only use wokeness as a brownie, as a talking point against the right? Isn't that what the fuck Ben Shapiro says all the time? That you can't, that's virtue signaling. If you don't care about injustice here, but then act like you care about the same injustice there, isn't that fucking virtue signaling? That's precisely what Ben Shapiro is doing.
Trading, and the response has basically been muted from the Western world. And did you see that? Did you see that video of the Chinese ambassador in Britain being asked on the BBC about that tape?
No, I didn't.
It's fantastic. So the BBC interviewer shows him the tape of the people being pushed onto trains, right? And he says, "What is this?" And the Chinese ambassador says, "I can't see it. I'm not sure what you're talking about." He's literally saying that the screen is huge. It's right behind him. Like he's looking right at it. And he acts as though he can't see it. And then he starts talking about the natural beauty of the region, right? He won't deal with it. He won't explain what it is. And the rest of the world is just like, well, you know what? This is where, you know, in the sporting world, the story that's undercovered in the sporting world is the blowback on that the NBA gave to Daryl Morey, the Houston Rockets GM, for saying free Hong Kong. Right? You can't even get anybody in the NBA to condemn China while China's subjecting 1 million Uyghurs to abject slavery. Mark Cuban just had an exchange with Ted Cruz the other day where he was going after Cruz for something, and Cruz said, well, just, you know, he questioned Cruz's balls or something, and Cruz came back at him and said, well, do you have the balls to condemn China? And Cuban said something like, well, you know, I don't want to get involved in the internal affairs of another country. And I thought, well, that is not an internal affairs question. It's one thing to say I don't want to get involved in the tax rates of other countries. It's another thing to say shaving people's heads, shipping them on trains to concentration camps where you force them into labor and or sterilize them.
Excuse me.
Is this motherfucker actually making a BDS argument against China right now? I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my fucking mind, dude. Okay, I'm sorry, but this is so fucking stupid. Hasan, have you noticed that he's speaking very fast, though? Guess what, Sweaty? You have no counter argument to how fast he's speaking. You're right. That's why I'm owned all the time. This is insane. Mark Cuban needs to stop working with China because of concentration camps. Also, BDS is anti-Semitic. What is the BDSM argument? BDS, boycott, divest, and sanctions on the state of Israel for annexation of the Western Bank and mass atrocities committed against the Palestinian population. It is a peaceful form of protest to pull back the economic force of the American government against the state of Israel to stop them from committing mass atrocity against Palestinian people. It was founded. It's the same exact concept that was utilized against the South African apartheid government. Okay, so that's precisely what BDS is. It's something that Ben Shapiro considers to be the most anti-Semitic thing and routinely agitates against.
That seems like not an internal issue that you're not allowed to criticize, really.
Yeah, that's a big one. But the China thing is so crazy because so many business interests have this connection with them, and so much of the money that they generate is because of China. I mean, the NBA, films, there's so much of our culture that kowtows to China. We're so connected to them. And that's one of the things that we really found out from this pandemic is how many things are built there, how much of our medicine, how much we rely on.
Yeah, this is when we found out that manufacturing was in China. I love that, dude. Well, I guess you can't hate on the dude for just finding out. But this is unironically, just found out about capitalist corporations moving the entire working class, moving their entire manufacturing overseas to increase shareholder value and put profit above the interests of the American people. And damn, that shit sucks, dude. That's fucking crazy, dude. Like, what did you avoid the made in China labels or something your entire life? The fuck?
On China.
It also demonstrates the lie of the idea that if you trade with somebody, then they're going to liberalize.
Yeah.
Right? That was something that was pushed over the last 30, 40 years real hard, which is we'll help them out economically, we'll have mutual trade, it'll be good for both of us, and they'll liberalize because once they realize it's good to be part of the world economy, then they won't be tyrants anymore. And instead, they just took all the chips off the table and said, no, actually, I'm going to double down on this, and we're going to get more tyrannical, not less. I mean, Xi is the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao. It's incredible.
Is Ben
You don't
anti-free
love the
trade
spirit of
now? What the
justice.
fuck?
You love
Joe Rogan on the decline of LA with Ben Shapiro.
The
What
Joe
is
Rogan
this?
experience.
One thing that we're seeing with society and culture in general, and one thing that sort of does support the idea of maintaining these sort
love the
of
spirit
rigid
of justice.
disciplines,
You love
is
your
that
father, the
when
devil.
things start to slide just a little, you lose like these little incremental steps. They slide, and people go, "Oh God, what's the big deal? What do you care?" And you're like, "I see where this is going. Like it's going down that way. This is not going to stop. It's sliding."
Oh, yeah. And
Slippery
you saw it in
slope.
L.A. I mean, I've lived in L.A. my whole life. And the move from
You don't
L.A.
love
being a
the spirit of
pretty
justice.
safe,
You
fairly
love
nice
your
city,
father, the
suburban
devil.
in orientation, to just overrun with horror shows is really... It was a lot faster than I thought it would be. But it's sort of you're right. It's a gradual decline, and then it's just off a cliff.
Well, you started to see tents, and you didn't see them at all for decades. And then all of a sudden, I started seeing tents. I remember I was doing Fear Factor in Skid Row in the early 2000s. So we would film down there, and I'd
You
be like,
don't
"This
love
is
the spirit
crazy.
of justice.
Like, has anybody
You
seen
love
this? Does
your
anybody
father,
know
the
this?" Because there was
devil.
these homeless streets. Like, you would
Yep.
go down these gigantic, and downtown LA back then, for people who don't live in LA, you would think, oh, downtown's like downtown New York or downtown Cleveland. No, downtown LA was a no man's land.
Nothing's going on in downtown L.A.
It is now. Like,
Little bit,
there's,
yeah.
well, it was pre-COVID. It was
Yeah.
like there was some bars and there was some really cool upscale apartment buildings. It was kind of
You
picking
don't
up.
love the spirit
But
of justice.
I took my family
love your
there
father,
before
the
COVID,
devil.
like 4 months before COVID or so. We went to
By the way, I just want to point out that the crime rate in Los Angeles per capita has halved since 1985. And this, of course, tracks with the rest of the fucking planet, literally everywhere. So this notion that,
You
like,
don't love the
LA
spirit
used
of
to be
justice.
much safer
You love your father,
is,
the
ironically, not something that you can find in data. Okay? Now, I'm not a silly bitch like Ben Shapiro,
You
and
don't
I'm not
love
going
the
to sit
spirit of
here and tell
justice.
you that it's
You love your
for
father,
one
the
singular
devil.
reason or not. I'm not going to turn around and tell you, like, oh, it's because of policing or it's because of whatever the fuck. Like, I'm not going to give you a non-contextual talking point, but non-contextual statistic. But if you are talking about crime specifically, well, yes, crime has decreased.
You love
LA
your
in the
father,
90s
the
was
devil.
not safer than LA right now. However, homelessness is a gigantic problem in Los Angeles, but that's not a consequence
You
of
don't love
crime.
the spirit of justice.
That's
You love
straight
your
up a
father,
consequence
the
of
devil.
the housing market in most cosmopolitan and major cities in America pricing out
You don't
millions
love
of
the
people.
spirit of justice.
we were going to go to, there's a famous donut place there.
You don't
So we said,
love the
just
spirit of
one of
justice.
those goofy Sunday
love
things.
your
Like, what do you guys want to
father,
do
the
today? Let's go
devil.
get donuts. So we went to downtown LA. Like, holy shit.
Oh, yeah.
Literally shit. Human shit. On the streets. Everything smelled like piss.
You don't
Bums
love the spirit
everywhere.
of
And I'm like,
justice.
okay, stay
You
close
love
to me.
your father,
Stay over
the
here.
devil.
If anybody comes near you, move closer to me. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, this is crazy. Like, I don't want them to be freaked out, but I'm like, this is nuts.
Well, the thing is that sort of disaster
You
area
don't love the spirit
stuff
of
in LA was
justice.
sort of localized.
You love
Right?
your
It really
father,
like
the
I worked in the
devil.
LADA's office for a summer when I was in law school. It's been like 2007, so it was a while ago. And I remember they had a giant tent city, and you had to walk from the car. They made you park
love
a
the
mile
spirit of
away and
justice.
walk it, and so you're walking
You
through
love
Skid
your
Row.
father, the
And it's like,
devil.
okay, well, this is really terrible, and honestly, I feel bad for these people because I don't think the best solution for people who
Thank
are
you,
drug addicted
Analingus
or mentally ill
9000.
is to live on the street, and a heavy percentage of people who are homeless are drug addicted or mentally ill is to live on the street, and a heavy percentage of people who are homeless are drug addicted or mentally ill. But for people who are living in the suburbs, like this is at least localized. It's not like reaching into your
Right.
life. And then over the past 13 years, like I live in a pretty decent suburban area, and I'm seeing like open needles on the street. Walked out of my house one day, there's just a guy lying face down in the gutter like Edgar Allan Poe. Like, and I thought, well, this is falling apart rather quickly.
What do you think caused the slide or the expansion of the slide? Because I agree with you that it was very isolated. Skid Row was very isolated. Downtown LA was very. I remember one time.
It can't be market forces, right? It just simply can't be people getting priced out of the housing market. It just can't be. I'm sure that it has nothing to do with that. Because that would mean that there's a problem with the free market, and the free market is working as intended. So it's probably people being evil or people being too lazy. Like all of those people who are, working at essential jobs in Los Angeles, but, are priced out of their fucking housing market, so they have to live out of their cars. Like, those people aren't working hard enough.
Time we were filming in downtown LA, and we were on a gurney, or I guess that's what you call one of those things called where it lifts up. Anyway, we were filming some Fear Factor stunt, and as we got up, we could see people smoking crack. And I go, oh, look, there's people smoking crack right there. And the guests on the show, like a lot of them, they fly from all over the country. And they're like, is that real? They're really smoking crack? I'm like, that's crack. That's a homeless person smoking crack. Welcome to LA. It's right there. But I didn't feel bad about it. I felt like, look, it's unfortunate, but this is not like indicative of all of LA. We're just in a shitty spot because it's really cheap to film here.
Right.
So here you go. You got a little gift. You get to see some weird shit while you're here. But I didn't think it was ever going to get to the point where you're on like Winnetka off the 101, and there's 80 fucking tents, and they put a porta potty there. They put a porta potty there.
We're doing
people.
real building and real development here in Los Angeles. Not apartment buildings. We got some porta potties. Every underpass shall have a porta potty, thanks to Mayor Eric.
Why are they laughing about this? I mean, these are like human beings that are living in these fucking conditions that the actual like UN Council of Human Rights considers to be a worse off condition than a refugee camp in Greece, dude. Skid Row, according to international authorities that investigate the desolate conditions in which refugees live, Skid Row is worse than Greek refugee camps, man. And these motherfuckers are laughing. How do you not see that this is a policy failure? I really don't get it. How do you not look at that and realize that it's literally a policy failure? I mean, these are human beings suffering.
Garcetti.
You pay attention to politics far more than I do, and law enforcement and all that. What happened? How did it get to this?
Well, on this particular problem, this actually started with a bunch of lawsuits. So the LAPD used to have the authority to move people's shit if it was on the sidewalk. Or if people had a bunch of stuff that was on the sidewalk and they're just camping out there, the LAPD could come, they could take their stuff away, and they could rouse them, or they could arrest them for trespass or for loitering. And then the ACLU actually sued, and they said that this is a violation of people's personal property.
Oh,
and
ACLU,
the courts,
you do such good work sometimes.
and the courts ruled that you actually are not allowed to move people's stuff, that's actually personal property, even though it's in a public area. And then they got a ruling from a court that you're allowed to live in your car, because for a while you weren't allowed to live in your car, and then it was you're allowed to live in your car. So
I mean, he's admitting that it's not like they're not discussing a solution at all to this problem. The solution is literally push them away from me. Also, living in your car is out of necessity. It's not like these people want to live in their fucking cars. No one wants to live in their cars. This is not just even addressing homelessness, unless homelessness is only a problem when it is in front of my eyes, I guess.
now you're basically allowed to leave your stuff on the sidewalk, and the police are not allowed to move it, and you're allowed to live in your car. And then there was this sort of equity movement that said, okay, well, they can do it in business districts, but why can't they do it in like more suburban areas? Why can't they just move into nicer areas? After all, if there's misery, it should be equally spread across the city. And that's kind of what you're seeing. I mean, there have been so many breaking points over the last year in the city. And for me and my wife, I mean, we looked at the rioting, and they shut down the entire city at 6 p.m. It's a county of 12 million people. And they shut down the entire county so that douchebags could run around shattering windows, pretending that they were standing up for social justice. They shut down Beverly Hills at 1 p.m. They shut down Rodeo Drive at 1 p.m. so that people could run up and down Rodeo Drive talking about how capitalism sucks while tweeting from their iPhone.
While stealing Nikes.
this shit is like, ay. Dude, this sucks. Like, this is something I understand why Joe Rogan would not have a good example or a good counter to this. I understand why Joe Rogan would not have a good way to deal with the homelessness problem or whatever. He's a fucking ape, right? He's an ape. Of course he doesn't get it. But like, at least he could ask the question, like, so what do you think? How do we deal with this? Like, or at the very least, like when Ben Shapiro says, "Oh, it's because people can't move their trash anymore," then it's like, well, that doesn't deal with the problem. Like, it just means you don't see it and you're seeing it now. But I don't get it. The shift from quarantine to unrest is two episodes left.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
You know, there was 2 moments where I was like, this is a real opportunity for us to come together. And one of them was the moment the lockdown happened. It felt to me very similar to right after 9/11, where everybody was confronted with their own mortality. Like, holy shit, like we might be on the verge of a pandemic, like in a movie, where a lot of the people we know die. And here we have to be kind to each other. We have to be. This is what's important. Family's important. And I remember thinking, I've never been closer to my family, never been closer to my friends. We were calling each other all the time. It was like there was real hope in that. I was like, if we get through this, we're gonna be tighter. We're gonna know what means something, what counts. Fuck stand-up comedy. Fuck everything else, man. What's important is love and friendship. Then it started to get angry. And it only took like 3 or 4 weeks where people started getting, like, they were scared. So people started getting shittier with each other online. And then I basically swore off Twitter. Yep. I was like, this is just too toxic and too hostile. The second moment where I thought we had the opportunity to come together was George Floyd. So George Floyd died. And all of a sudden, you have these Black Lives Matter protests, and I'm like, maybe we can finally make a dent on racism. Maybe we can finally make a dent in police brutality. Maybe this is a moment where we can come together and realize what's important. It's community, solidarity, that we're all in this together. Like, this is crazy. And then the cops need to be reformed. Like, they can't live like, and maybe we should take into account PTSD. Maybe we should take into account the fact that these fucking guys are pulling up on people every day that might shoot them in the face. They might never be able to see their family and their kids. Let's rework this. Let's think this shit through.
Yeah.
Nope. And then chaos. And then all of a sudden it became like what we saw yesterday, where they're breaking into Amazon Go in Seattle. Like, that fucking guy owns the Washington Post. He owns the most left-wing newspaper in America. And you're like, not good enough.
Well, you saw they set up a fake guillotine outside of Bezos' house in Washington, D.C.
It's insane.
Bezos.
It's madness. I
don't understand it. Bezos is a communist. He's a liberal. He's a liberal communist. Why are they setting up a guillotine? They don't even want Bezos. Washington Post, left wing. Jeff Bezos is a communist. I don't get it. Like, these guys are fucking crazy, dude. I mean, are there leftist people at Washington Post under their employ? Certainly. This notion that, like, a major newspaper is, like, leftist is completely insane. Okay? There is no left-wing major newspaper, dude. Literally all of them universally were, and still do this shit, but universally champion any sort of imperialist affair. Like, they're 100% lob it up to them. Like, maybe they're center right, okay, for the most part, but they're definitely not fucking leftist.
Rich.
I totally agree with you, by the way. Like, when COVID happened, I thought, I can't really see how we're going to split in partisan fashion over this thing.
Right.
Like, everybody wants to live, and everybody would also like to eventually get back to regular life. And the better we can live, the better we can get back to regular life. So it seems like, okay, we're on board. When it came to the lockdowns, the original lockdowns, I was like, okay, I'm on board. You know, I'm taking this thing really seriously. I've got parents in their 60s. I feel like, you know, I'm in good health. I'm fairly young. I'm 36. But for my parents, I don't want my parents getting this thing. And so we're still taking this thing real seriously. I mean, I'm still wearing a mask.
And then he literally said, the average life expectancy in the United States is 78 years old. If you're 80 years old and you die from coronavirus, well, then sucks to suck. He did say that when he was criticizing the lockdown measures. So
around to public places, and I think people should. I think that's a responsible thing to do. But it immediately turned into, who can we blame for this? Who can we blame? Who's doing it wrong? And it seems like there were only like a couple of things that you really can do that are obviously wrong. Like, nobody has a good solution on this thing. Okay, it ravaged Italy. It ravaged Spain. It ravaged New York. Like, there are a couple things you shouldn't do. Don't take the olds and send them back into the nursing homes with COVID, right? I mean, that's like an obvious one. But beyond that, like, just staying away from each other and socially distancing and wearing, like, this is all kind of commonsensical stuff that people have known since the flu pandemic of 1918. Like, nothing has really changed. And yet it immediately turned into, who can we blame? Who's to blame for all these dead people? Maybe it's Ron DeSantis, or maybe it's Cuomo. Like, who can we blame? So that was terrible. And then on the Floyd stuff, I had the same feelings. Like, I don't know a single human being who watched that tape and didn't think, okay, that guy deserves to go to jail. Chauvin, right? The officer in that case, in the George Floyd case.
Who didn't think that? Yeah.
Everyone I know.
Everybody thought
every
that.
single
Yes.
person.
So why doesn't he have that same kind of energy for Pantaleo? Was it Pantaleo that killed? Was it Pantaleo that choked out and killed Eric Garner, or was Pantaleo the one in? I think Pantaleo was the one in Arizona. These things fucking merge into one another. Earlier in the conversation that he had with fucking Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro said that, well, with Eric Garner, it's a little different because, the officer in question, like, we don't know if he was racist, like, we don't know if he was. We don't know what the situation was, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay. Same situation. Bullshit, meaningless fucking crime, like selling Lucy cigarettes, just like it was over a fucking forgered check. Oh, Brailsford, Philip Brailsford was the murderer of Daniel Shaver. Why are you defending one and the other? Maybe it's because one is like more recent memory or something?
Person was like, yeah, that's real bad. Like, that's, and cops, like, I know tons of cops. I'm friendly with tons of cops. And not one of them was like, yeah, that's good police procedure. I'm glad he did that. Like, no one thought that. And so when people are like, okay, well, we're going to look at police brutality. Maybe we'll take a look at qualified immunity. Maybe we'll take a look at police unions and the kind of restrictive covenants that they have with the cities, and how we make sure that everybody knows who the bad cops are so they can't get hired at different places. Like, all those are solutions. But it quickly turned from, well, we don't want to talk about solutions. Solutions are a bad idea. What we need to do is we need to shout about everything we can possibly imagine all at once. And you know what? Instead, let's have a conversation about, like, was George Washington a bad guy? Let's have a conversation instead about, like, just completely defunding the police. We want to have, like, a responsible conversation about things that make sense. We'll talk about, like, what if we just got rid of the police?
How
about that?
crazy is that discussion? That discussion, when people were really saying defund the police, I'm like, cooler heads will prevail. But they're going to realize. And I think they're realizing it now in New York City. I mean, New York City has had record crime, record homicides.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? De Blasio is, I mean, I would have never imagined I would look at Garcetti and go, well, he's better.
That's exactly right.
I look at Garcetti and I look at de Blasio. I'm like, Garcetti, I'll have him over to my house for dinner. He's way better
Oh, yeah,
than
the
de
weird,
Blasio. De Blasio is
groundhog murderer.
so weird. He's so, you can have protests, but only Black Lives Matter protests.
That one, that was a solid. You know, that may have been the moment when I realized that we were all effed. Right? It was the moment when, like, we're in the middle of a global pandemic with hundreds of thousands of people dead, and an entire swath of our media and health elites just decided randomly that if you were protesting against lockdown, you were very bad, right? Then you were a racist and you were going to get people killed. And
protesting against a really stupid cause that is literally causing people to die, as Ben Shapiro personally admitted when he said he's in support of the lockdowns, by the way, is the exact same as protesting against police brutality. Every matter of protest is the same, right? That's it. There is no difference between good things and bad things. I am a heightened intellectual.
You should wear a mask. And I was like, well, if you're I sort of agree with the mask thing. Like, yeah, okay. And then you get millions of people in the streets yelling at each other and breathing on each other and spitting on each other. And you got health professionals on TV being like, well, racism is a public health threat. I guess they.
As much as these fucking sickos were so horny and salivating to see coronavirus results spike after these protests, as much as they wanted to directly say, oh, look at how much the coronavirus spikes happen in places where they protest, notice how they don't really talk about it that much. And that's because there is zero evidence to back that up. As a matter of fact, the real evidence in this circumstance shows that reopening the economy was directly related to the spikes, and that protests did not make a meaningful contribution in increasing coronavirus spread. That does not mean that protests did not increase the amount of coronavirus cases. Of course it did. As far as protests significantly increasing coronavirus cases or leading to a spike, that did not happen. Sorry, guys. It just didn't. I know you want it to happen, but facts do not care about your feelings. One thing that they did find, all of these studies that were conducted immediately after the protests or weeks after the protests to track if protests were responsible for the increase in coronavirus, found that while protests were happening, there was actually a decrease in activity in the region because people were afraid of going outside. But when protests stopped, more people were going outside because the economy had reopened. But no, that's like an actual analysis and critical thinking. So, of course, it must be fake news. Do I think that protests increase the number of people that got coronavirus? Of course it did. I have never, ever said that protests have not increased the number of cases. Were they responsible for the spike? Were they responsible for the spike in comparison to reopening the economy that actually got hundreds of thousands of people that literally went outside and then were indoors? A lot of people that didn't fucking wear masks as well? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we were watching a fucking video and I forgot. Let's keep
that
watching.
You can do that now. It's like, well, what the? I know people who died in the hospital of COVID and their family could not visit them.
Yes.
Like, they literally died alone in the hospital of COVID and family could not visit them. And you're telling me that it's deeply important that we have, like, dance lines. This was stuff happening at rallies, like dance lines in the streets in New York to fight racism. That's deeply important. But a daughter being able to visit her dad before he dies, that's not important. Come on, what bullshit?
I am for your freedom to protest. I'm 100% for your freedom to protest. I'm also for your freedom to go to the gym. I'm also for your freedom to go to a comedy club if you so choose. I'm for your freedom to go to a restaurant. Look, they figured out how to do restaurants in a lot of places. The servers wear masks, and many of them wear face shields. You distance the tables apart from each other. You do temperature checks. You take people's names and addresses down when they enter so that if anybody gets sick, if there's any sort of... And they've been able to do this.
No, this is right. The vectors of transmission are typically closed areas, people in solid proximity with each other for long periods of time.
Yes.
Right? That's the stuff where people are getting...
Wait, so you admit that that's not fucking protest then? Then why did you make such a fucking large argument about... Wait, what the fuck? Why did he just own himself? That's so weird. So literally gyms, comedy clubs, and restaurants are vectors of coronavirus clusters or super spreaders.
This stuff. And I trust most Americans not, like, some Americans are going to be dumbasses. Some people are just dumbasses.
Oh, there's a lot of videos. I don't know if you watch YouTube. There's plenty of Karens out there. How sad is it if your name is Karen and you're a good person? All the good Karens out there.
You're toast.
I'm sorry, ladies. I'm really sorry.
But it's like I made this point online. I got shellacked for it, but I was pointing out that most Americans are wearing masks right now. By polling data, 59% of Americans say that they always wear a mask when they leave the house. And if you look at the map of mask wearing...
Wait. Dog, that means... Wait, what? That's not good? What the fuck? Okay. This statistic would never, ever fly for any sort of measure that's life-saving. That's fucking crazy, dude. So 41% of Americans are not wearing masks? What the fuck? Yeah, 59% of people stop at red lights. 59% of people drive sober. Yeah, airplanes land only 41% of the time. Or sorry, 59% of the time. You know, airplanes don't land 41% of the time, but it's okay because, hey, the majority of times, it's 97 in Hong Kong. That is literally the most insane thing. I can't. This is so crazy.
Across the board, in the places where there are the most cases, people are wearing masks. That's not, I wasn't saying masks don't work. I wear a mask. I think that the evidence shows that they do something. We don't know that they're not like full protective. The cloth masks are not as effective as surgical masks, which are not as effective as N95s. But wear a mask, good. The point that I was making is people are acting in fairly rational fashion, meaning if you think COVID is like around you, you're wearing a mask and you're socially distanced.
41% of Americans don't wear masks all the time, but according to Ben Shapiro, a virus that has an asymptomatic spread that is a super spreader, especially because of that, with 41% of people not wearing masks, is Americans being rational, dude. What the fuck?
So this idea that Gavin Newsom knows best how you ought to live your life, like I got some trouble with that, especially because California saw the same uptick as Texas and Florida, and California never opened. I mean, we've been here the whole time. California never.
What? Yes, it did. Why is he lying? Come on, Joe Rogan. You have to fucking counter this, dude. He's literally lying. We did. I was going to the fucking gym, you dipshit.
Never really opened.
Well, we were doing pretty good up until the protests.
Yeah, that's
everything
true.
seemed like it was on an uptick. The Comedy Store was talking to them about becoming an essential business and opening up, because they had opened up bars and they had opened up restaurants.
Oh, so California did open. Oh, okay, got it. So California did reopen. Thank you, Joe Rogan, for correcting him, but not really correcting him, and then saying everything was good up to the fucking protest. Oh my God. This is so stupid. You literally just said California reopened, dude.
And they didn't really have a designation for comedy clubs. They sort of talked about it as a live performance venue, but then that puts comedy clubs at the same place as the Staples Center, which sounds crazy, right?
Right.
So they're like, listen, we can do this. We can just have half capacity, temperature checks, do it right. They're doing it right in a lot of places all over the country. We can do this. The audience has to wear masks. This is totally doable. And so they were right about to do that. And then this other thing is,
why did California have to close then, like last week? What was open if nothing was open? Anyway, let's keep going.
We were trying to figure out, like, is it
Fucking
protest
moron.
only? I think it's bars too.
Yeah.
The thing about bars is close talk. People are
And
drunk.
loud talk, yeah.
Yeah, they're drunk and they're on top of each other. I think bars probably
So
had a
churches,
significant uptick.
Right,
Yes.
lots of singing, lots of
Yeah.
vocalizing. Right, churches and synagogues were a main vector for this. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, but again, these are all things that are fairly commonsensical and we can agree on, and yet we're beating the hell out of each other over this stuff. And there's the suggestion we know what to do. If only we just did it, this would stop. It's not going to stop. Okay, it's not going to stop. It's a very transmissible disease. We don't have a vaccine. As long as people are out there, it's going to continue to pass. Wear a mask if you're in close proximity with others, and that's pretty much it. The hospitals are getting better at this, thank God.
Yes, they are. And the crazy thing was that they were saying, like, you can only protest if it's a Black Lives
Yeah, that
Matter
was insane.
protest. What about a protest for increasing your immunity? What about a protest for educating people to the techniques and the strategies for increasing your immune system? They're out there, and there's no discussion about this amongst health professionals. Amongst politicians. If you listen to health professionals, people that really understand the human body, they'll tell you there's a lot of strategies. There's a lot of things you could do. First of all, eliminate alcohol, eliminate caffeine, eliminate sugar, eliminate all the bullshit in your diet. Start taking vitamin supplements. Get outside. Get some vitamin D. Get your body healthy. Exercise. Do all these things, and you will increase your immune system. You increase your body's health.
Bro,
you don't hear
science.
a word of that. All of it is just stay inside. We have to stay apart to keep everybody safe. And God damn.
The number one vector for transmission remains the home. Right, that's still the number one
Sure.
vector in every society is the home. People going home and giving it to each other. And when I remember, for me, one of the breaking points in
That's when you end the conversation. No, that's when you end the conversation. This is when you go, all right, our time is up. It's the stupidest take I've ever had on this podcast, and I've had white supremacists on here. This is the stupidest take I've ever heard. A world record for the dumbest take. Thank you for coming on, Ben Shapiro, but we should probably end it here. Honestly, I can't even. He said the number one vector of transmission is the home. People give it to each other at home. Well, where do they get it from, Ben? Where do they get it from and then they give it to each other? Is it just like manifesting inside of houses? What's the counter here? Should people not be at home? Like people would be less likely to contract coronavirus if they were outdoors? I mean, this is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard, dude.
LA was when they decided they were going to shut down all open areas. They're going to shut down all the parks. They're going to shut down all the
Right.
beaches. And I was like, what is this?
Well, not
What
only that,
is
it goes
this?
against science because
Right.
Again, ironic considering that on the one hand, they keep saying, oh, these protests must have led to massive spikes. On the other hand, they are correct when they say that being outdoors is not a significant problem. Like, being outdoors is not as big as a problem as long as you're social distancing and wearing a mask.
There's been papers that have been studied that show that this virus dies almost instantaneously when it's exposed to sunlight or even artificial sunlight.
What? No.
Yeah, none of it makes any sense. But it does feel like, bottom line, there were a bunch of gaps in American society, and then a bad thing happened, and everything just sort of fell apart. It was sort of like a house of cards, and then there's a little bit of weight put right on top of the house of cards, and everything just collapsed in on itself.
Well, people are panicking. You know, they're getting scared, and then the economy's collapsing. So the economy collapsing at the same time as the George Floyd protests led people to start looting. And then people...
Yeah, that's why famously cases in Arizona have never happened. Arizona is not surging because of sunlight. That's so good.
People that didn't give a fuck about George Floyd or Black Lives Matter were just stealing shit. And then the police was letting them steal shit. They were standing down in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica, literally cops standing there while people were smashing doors.
I gotta say, the media coverage of this stuff is just awful. The media were cheering this stuff on. I mean, they were simultaneously making two arguments that conflict with each other. One was, these are mostly peaceful protests. First of all, mostly peaceful is it's the most loosely defined, arbitrarily applied term in history.
Well, if you get
O.J. Simpson was mostly
people,
peaceful that night. O.J. Simpson was mostly peaceful that night. For like an hour 15, he was really not peaceful. But for the other hours between sunset and sunrise, he was unbelievably peaceful. Like, I've never heard this term before, where a protest turns into a vast riot.
Perhaps there's a difference between one person committing a crime and a group of individuals that are not even remotely related to one another.
Wrecking all of Melrose, and everybody's like, "Well, it was mostly peaceful." Well, what is that? What is
so
that?
true.
So how about this? How about you either say that the protesters and the looters are two different groups of people, and we treat them differently? If you're protesting, that's First Amendment activity. The minute you shatter a store window, you go to jail, right?
Yes,
that's the way this should run.
agreed.
Or alternatively, if you're saying they're the same group, then they need to be treated as lawbreakers. So I believe the first. I believe if you're a protester, you should be protesting. If you're a looter and a rioter, then you should go to jail. But the media refuse to make that distinction, and then they act like the cops are the bad guys when they come in to arrest people who are violating the law. You're seeing this in Portland right now. They're trying to burn down the damn courthouse.
Yeah.
And the feds come in and start arresting people, and people are like, "This is the Gestapo." It's like, okay. Speaking as one of the tribe, let me say this is not like the Gestapo. Okay, like the Gestapo was not famous for rolling up on people and then charging them, and then if they didn't have a charge, releasing them. That wasn't like the Gestapo's thing. Like,
The classic, they're not literally killing people argument. I love that. It's my favorite argument. Also, hates identity politics. Hey, by the way, guys, I'm Jewish. So, listen to me on all matters that pertain to World War II.
I'm sorry, but you decided that you wanted to throw a firebomb at the federal courthouse, and your local mayor said he wasn't going to let the police do anything. And so DHS...
The fucking DHS literally arrested one of those people for a laser, for being around someone who was potentially using a laser. They detained him without telling him why, which is unconstitutional. Isn't Ben Shapiro Mr. Constitution? You do realize laser pointers can cause permanent eye damage, right? Hey! If you understand that laser pointers can cause permanent eye damage, what the fuck does tear gas do, you stupid cocksucker? What about getting beaten the fuck out of with a baton, you piece of shit? Laser pointers can cause permanent eye damage. Wow, what a weapon of war that is.
Just came in and arrested you.
Don't love the spirit of justice.
Tough shit. I mean, like, I'm sorry. That's at some point somebody's got to restore some semblance of law and order here.
Well, it's a weird situation because I don't exactly understand why they're attacking the courthourse. I don't exactly understand why they're smashing the windows at Amazon Go.
It's Steve Martin, right? They must hate these paint cans, right? Like from the jerk, right?
But it went from this to literally tear down the structure of society.
I despise Ben Shapiro because his fucking dumbass takes are the reason why I have morons in my chat that say, well, they technically have laser pointers and that could really cause permanent blindness. I mean,
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Well, this is where we get into sort of the deep philosophy point. And this is actually really the biggest problem right now on the racism point is the shifting definition of racism. So I had the unfortunate experience of actually reading one of the best-selling books in the country, Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. And let me just tell you, a greater pile of horseshit has never been produced by a bevy of horses. It is an awful book, and it is basically rooted in the same theory as Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. The basic definition of racism changes in this theory. So racism, you and I were sitting here discussing racism, and the way I define racism is probably the same way you define racism. You believe in the inferiority or superiority of a group based on race, of an individual based on their membership in that group too, right? That would be racism. I believe that you're inferior or you're superior based on your race. End of story, right? That's racism.
That's racism.
So Robin DiAngelo and Ibram Kendi redefine racism to mean any societal structure that results in a racial inequality is itself racist. So any structure that results in a not exact proportion between whites and blacks.
Does that make the NBA racist?
Exactly. The answer is kind of yes, except that the NBA is not racist because obviously it benefits black people, right? I mean, now, the NBA is not racist except it's because it's a meritocracy is the reason the NBA is not racist.
Right.
But Robin DiAngelo and Kendi both suggest that meritocracy is an aspect of whiteness. They say that meritocracy and individual are aspects of whiteness because these institutions, things like meritocracy and individualism and not seeing people's colors, these just reinforce hierarchies that end with disparate outcomes. And so what they say is in order to be anti-racist, you have to want to tear down the entire system. They literally say this. I know that I'm not misidentifying the argument because I've read their books. The basic notion that to be anti-racist, you have to tear down free markets, or you have to tear down free speech, or you have to, and what that means is, of course, that anytime there's rioting and looting.
I have no idea what the fuck he's talking about. I don't even know what he's saying.
Outrage at the broader American system, and so it justifies that sort of stuff. This is why you saw Nicole Hannah-Jones, the de facto editor of the New York Times, 1619 Project lady, tweeting out that she appreciated that people were calling these the 1619 riots. Because once you say America is rooted in slavery and rooted in evil and a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad place, then robbing a shop is just the latest iteration of you fighting the system.
Explain the 1619 correlation to people, if you would.
Sure. So the 1619 Project is something put forward by the New York Times. It's not good history. There are 4 Pulitzer Prize-winning historians who have said this is not good history. The basic argument is the United States was not founded in 1776 with the principles of the Declaration of Independence. The country was actually founded in 1619 with the importation of African slaves to American shores, because that's when the first African slave arrived in the United States, was 1619. So the idea is that the entire history of America is a history of a system that is endemically white supremacist, and that all of the Declaration of Independence is basically a lie, that the principle.
While there's many criticisms of the 1619 Project, this notion that America was built on white supremacist fundamentals is true. I don't know why the fuck you would be so upset or butthurt about it. Well, I do know why you would be butthurt about it, Ben Shapiro, but I mean, it is fucking true. I don't get why anyone would be like, this is not real.
Principles of all men are created equal. That was a lie when it was written, and it's a lie now. That the idea that we.
I mean, how do you justify all men are created equal, except for slaves, by the way, if that's not what was happening at the time? What? Like, you can say that white supremacy played a foundational principle, a foundational role in the development of the United States, while simultaneously saying that there were other forms of liberation that they engaged in for freeing themselves from monarchy, for example. Both of these things are true.
We have rights that.
Like, how does he justify the 3/5 compromise then, if that's not the case? All men are created equal except for black people who are only 3/5 of men.
That pre-exist government, that's a lie. All of these things are lies. The Constitution was built in order to enshrine white supremacy, and no evolution has taken place. So they essentially make the argument that from 1619 to 2020 is a continuum. Racism has gone underground a little bit, but it's still there, and it's still implicit in all of our systems. So the 1619 Project has essays blaming literally everything on racism. So disparities in maternal mortality between black women and white women, which, by the way, exist in Europe and in Canada. That's due to American racism. Traffic patterns in the United States is due to systematic American racism. Every racial disparity is attributable to a system that was rooted in slavery. Now, the traditional notion of America is that America was founded in 1776, and that the story of America is that America did tolerate the great original sin of slavery up until the Civil War and then tolerated Jim Crow up until the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s. And that is
He can't be serious, right? Like, is he saying that racism happened separately? Or like slavery happened separately for 200 years? Man, they were surely so tolerant, dude. Wow, how tolerant were Americans, am I right? You would literally never in a million years allow this kind of nonsense to go for any other issue except for black people in slavery. Which goes to show you how big of a part implicit biases play in the way we analyze the existence of black people. Just because you substituted encouraged or took advantage of with the word tolerated doesn't change the reality that 200 years of systemic discrimination by virtue of the color of your skin did not exist for black people. This is a wild take, dude.
a great stain and a blot on America. But the story of America is trying to fulfill the promises of the Declaration of Independence over time, make those promises available to everybody.
Like, Manifest Destiny is simply a toleration of the widespread displacement and genocide of indigenous populations. That's just, look at me. I'm just saying toleration instead of what actually happened, which then all of a sudden makes it acceptable.
And this isn't my argument. This is Martin Luther King Jr.'s argument when he talks in the March in Washington about fulfilling the promissory note of the Declaration of Independence. He says, we're here to cash the check, right? You issued us the check, and then you didn't let black Americans be Americans. We're here to cash the check. This is the argument Frederick Douglass, the freed slave, makes in 1852. He makes a famous speech before slavery is ended. And he says July 4th doesn't mean anything to black Americans because we're not included in the bargain. Include us in the bargain. The story of America is the Declaration of Independence, those principles that we should all basically still agree on because they're pretty good principles. Free speech, free assembly, all the things you see in the Constitution. That those things brought about greater freedom and prosperity than anything else and helped us overcome the sins that are present in all human societies and were present in the United States in extreme ways as well. But that's the counter narrative, right? The 1619 Project says that all that was basically nonsense and that America is just a history of whites keeping blacks down and that
I mean, to be fair, we did kind of continue slavery, chattel slavery for just a little bit longer than other people did.
The spirit of justice.
And then also did Jim Crow,
Poggies.
which was so horrific that it literally got the attention of a little-known guy, because he has no statues, by the name of Adolf Hitler,
For all the great commentary.
who was like, what you're doing with this phrenology stuff is very good, is sehr good. And the Jim Crow laws, maybe a little too much, but I like it. I like it a lot, actually. I'm going to use this thing. Now, you guys might not know who Adolf Hitler is because there's no statues erected in his honor. But he was a pretty bad guy, dude.
no progress has essentially been made. If there is progress, it's mostly a lie. And so every disparity now can be attributed to historic disparities between white and black.
Is there middle ground? So if we look at 1776 and we look at the Declaration of Independence and we look at America today in 2020, there clearly is some impact in the echoes of slavery, and then after that, Jim Crow. There's clearly some impact in these deeply impoverished communities that don't seem to advance.
Yes. So to make the argument about institutional racism, there's a couple ways you can read this. When people say systemic racism or institutional racism, I usually ask them to be a little more specific in what they mean, because there are a few ways you can read that. One is history has impact. Of course, that's true, right? That's true for everybody. It's true in your family history. Right? If you have a grandfather who went to prison on a particular charge, that leads to poverty for your parents, which led to more poverty for you. Right? People have histories. Those histories are embedded in their life experiences, and that's true for societies as well. All of that is for sure true. Then there's the question as to whether the institutions today are racist. And that's not quite the same thing, right? Because history has consequences is not the same thing as saying the rules today are racist, because the rules today are not racist.
Okay, but if you got like a fucking 7-point lead on the game for the first 3 quarters, like, it doesn't matter if the rules are equal on the 4th quarter. You still got a fucking 7-point lead. What the fuck? Even then it doesn't matter because the rules are still not equal.
racist, actually. The rules today are quite not racist. So,
But historically, it's fairly recent. If you go from the civil rights movement to 2020, we're really not talking about that much time. We're talking
3
about
generations,
50 plus years.
60 years, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
50 plus.
Right,
in the world of, you know,
How the fuck can he admit that like inequalities existed and not even that long ago, and then be like one generation solved all of that? It's so weird.
in the vast span of human history, it's not
a very small amount of time.
Right.
So clearly there's some impact of both racism and
Absolutely.
then Jim Crow laws. So that's where I'm saying there's a middle ground.
Yeah, and it is important for people on my side of the aisle, conservatives, to acknowledge and recognize the importance of history in people's living situations now. And it's important for people on the other side of the aisle to, at the same time, not attribute every single thing.
Okay. Ben Shapiro recognizing or adopting historical materialism in this circumstance. Well, not really. He's not doing that. Ben Shapiro understanding or at least recognizing that severe injustices occurred until the civil rights movement, I guess, where it magically disappeared, means that every other instance where he has said America has equality of opportunity is a lie and therefore should be struck from the record. Because that's another classic Ben Shapiro take, which is systemic racism does not exist. Also, yes, injustices did occur for 200 years. It was a big oopsie. We tolerated that. But then you also have to admit that equality of opportunity is a lie in this country. That we've never gotten to equality of opportunity. It's not even about equality of outcome. And equality of opportunity has never been achieved if you admit that there was a 200-year fucking lead that every other race has had.
To history, because
right. But
people
isn't
who
there
are born
always something like that? There's always like extremes on each position, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, but I don't think that it lies as far in the dead center of that as people, I think, want it to. What I mean by that is the problems that have plagued communities in the United States, not just the black community in the United States, but problems of racism or problems of sexism. The way those get alleviated is people making better choices over time. Right? That is the problem. That's the way that those issues get alleviated. When Jews arrived in the United States in the early 20th century, to talk of my people, when they came, they were impoverished. They didn't speak the language. They were banned from country clubs.
Yeah, when Jews came, they were in a fucking shitty circumstance. But at the same time that Jews were here, black people were still fucking engaging in even different forms of fucking slavery up till the 1940s, like sharecropping and shit. What the fuck? It's like survivor's bias, intergenerational survivor's bias. Oh, well, you know, we were victimized, but we got over it. Why can't black people? Is like such a fucking psychotic argument to make.
There was open discrimination against them. They were banned from Harvard, right? Harvard Law School had quotas on Jews. The way to fight against that is to make good decisions. And so you fight against the system to make sure that the system has rules that apply equally to everyone.
Right, but you clearly see that there's a big difference between people coming over here willingly and doing so in order to better their lives versus someone whose ancestors were dragged over here to be sold as property.
Oh my
and then
God.
dealing with the repercussions of that being your family history. And red line laws and all the other things that were put in place to sort of keep them in very specific areas, which to this day remain crime-ridden, gang-ridden, deeply impoverished communities.
Well, that's true, but the question is how much of that is historic redlining and how much of that is an 18-year-old kid today deciding to pick up a gun and shoot somebody?
But how much of that 18-year-old...
Wait. Oh, that's a mask off from Ben. Yes, it's an 18-year-old kid who's fucking villainous, black, and just inexplicably evil. That's what the problem is. Ah! How much of that could be described with historical redlining? It's not even just redlining, bitch. It's literally every facet of American existence. It's so bad. How the fuck does he say it?
Year-old kid today deciding to pick up a gun and shoot somebody is based on him growing up in this fucked up environment where that's what he models, where everything around him is crime and gangs, and you imitate your atmosphere, which what all humans do.
Right, but the answer is there's only one way to break that chain.
What way is that?
That way is to not pick up a gun and shoot somebody.
I think
meaning
that's
that
a simplistic
I love the
way
system.
of
I can
looking
now
at it
remove
if
the
you're on the
tinfoil hat.
outside of that
Future
community
never
and you're
went
not
mask
one of
off
those
like that.
18-year-old kids that grows up with the incredible influence of all the people around him, and that's all you see, and that's all you know.
Well, but the problem is the only way that's going to be the thing that your kid doesn't know is for you not to do it. At some point, personal agency has to come in.
It does,
Because
but
what's this-
education, and teaching them about personal agency and letting them understand that there's a way out of this and that the path that they see being replicated over and over again by these people that wind up dying young, that wind up going to jail, that there are other options. There's a lot of kids that never get that other information, or if they get it, they get little blips of it, but the vast majority of the information, the vast majority of the influence they get is terrible.
Well, I totally agree with this. And this is why I think the worst thing that you can say to a kid is you're born behind the 8 ball and no matter what you do, you're not going to succeed.
Yes, I
Right? That's
agree.
literally the worst thing you can say to a kid. What you should be saying is, look at how your grandfather was born behind the 8 ball and look how hard he had to work in order to get ahead.
Yeah, like white kids are told that, and that's why they succeed at higher rates than black kids do, because black kids are not told that. Ben Shapiro knows. Also, by the way, notice how the motorized goalposts all of a sudden went from, well, there's some inexplicable evil within an 18-year-old who is choosing to do violent activities to, well, actually, it's just like the parenting.
And look at all the
if
opportunities.
that's true, though. But if your grandfather wasn't ahead, didn't get ahead, if your grandfather was in and out of jail, if your father was in and out of jail, everyone around you is like that, if there's literally no influence that's positive in your life, the idea of saying to a kid like that, hey, don't pick up a gun and shoot somebody, that's way too simplistic a version of their future, in my
Well, I mean,
my
the
opinion.
problem is I don't see an alternative solution.
I
Right, when
think
you're talking
an
about
alternative
solutions.
I think an alternative solution is there has to be some sort of large-scale intervention in these communities to do something about what has already been set in motion and the momentum that keeps continuing decade after decade. I don't know what could be done.
Well, but that's the problem, is that I think that a lot of the solutions that have been proposed have already been tried. Meaning
Like
that,
what?
so for example, LBJ thought that the way to alleviate a lot of these inequalities was the war on poverty. And he openly talked about this. He gave a speech very famously in which he said, we're trying to guarantee equality of outcome, not just equality of opportunity, equality of outcome. And you can't hold the race where somebody is starting 20 yards behind and then fire the gun and say, okay, it's an equal race, right? So you have to get the person who's 20 yards behind to actually.
That's not equality of outcome, you fucking asshole. That's equality of opportunity, and that was a failure regardless. Like, it didn't fucking work. So, what the fuck?
Get up to the starting line so that they're equal. And so the idea was we're going to fight this war on poverty and alleviate poverty largely through transfer payments and through the government taking a forcible step in favor of alleviating people's lives. We've now spent $22 trillion in the war on poverty, and we have about the same number of black Americans living under the poverty line as were living under the poverty line by the late 70s. The real issues that are creating intergenerational poverty, everyone knows this, but it remains true. The number one predictor of intergenerational poverty in the United States remains single motherhood. The single motherhood rate in the black community was 20% in 1960. It is upward of 70% today. That's not unique to the black community, by the way. It's true in the white community as well. The 5% of white kids were born out of wedlock in 1960. Today, it's upward of 40%.
Wait, so doesn't that mean that white people and white culture is much worse than black culture because children being born out of wedlock has increased in the black community, but like really increased in the white community? What the fuck? Also, dude, I hate this fucking family correlation. It's so dumb, dude. A child being born out of wedlock, even by the same Brookings Institute analysis that Ben Shapiro touts all the time, is an indication of socioeconomic conditions. Okay? It's literally, it's such a fucking dumb take. And it's, again, correlation in this circumstance, leading Ben Shapiro to act like is the causal factor.
That is not, something has happened, and it is not a matter of increased racism. That's not happening because of increased racism. right? That is happening
You
because
don't love
there's
the spirit
been
of justice.
a
You
cultural
love your
change
father, the
that does not
devil.
place tremendous emphasis for black or white or for anybody on personal responsibility and personal agency. There needs to be a mindset change. We do this, by the way, in all other areas of American life except for the most important decisions. In the area of sports, nobody does this routine. This is a point Shelby Steele makes. In the area of sports, if a kid does not have a good jump shot, nobody says to him, you know what, you don't have a good jump shot because your father didn't have a good jump shot, his grandfather didn't have a good jump shot, and the game is biased against you. We say, okay, if you want to be on the team, you're going to have to learn to shoot a jump shot, right? That
Right,
sounds
but don't-
harsh.
Wait. Why the fuck would you make an analogy to sports in this circumstance when there's an entire industry dedicated to picking fucking people that literally come from
You don't love the
impoverished
spirit of
conditions
justice.
to
You love your
lift them
father,
up
the
personally by like literally grabbing them from poor communities to ensure that they have the same kind of access
You
to the
don't
same
love the
amenities
spirit of justice.
that rich people
You
do
love your
so they
father,
can
the
play at a competitive level and allow their natural talents to be seen. If we were to do that in American society, that's literally the argument that I'm making. That's the same argument I always make about fucking, you don't know what kind of hidden talents are in the third world. We have no idea. We could be fucking solving cancer across the board and AIDS across the board. We don't know. You don't know if some fucking kid who was born in Africa has that capability. You'll never know because we're not educating them, because that kid's going to fucking die at the age of 5 from malaria. That's the problem. That's how we make society better, by uplifting the material conditions of everyone, including people in the fucking third world. Or if we're going to look at this just domestically, that's how you make America better, by literally using the scouting system, okay? Literally using the scouting system in sports. That is a fundamental part of why American sports is so fucking advanced, because they literally, once someone demonstrates talent, they literally pick them and pull them up so that they have the same base level material conditions so they can fucking play basketball and own. So their natural talents can be realized and actualized. Why don't we do that for every single person across the board in America? That is the sole purpose of the American government. That's what a good government does. Not just individually cherry picking people that have demonstrated natural talent, but every single person
don't love
has that
the spirit of
same
justice.
base
You
level
love
of
your
material
father,
equality,
the devil.
so that they have a similar starting point.
That
Don't
sounds
you-
bad, but
sports are different. And here's why sports are different: because sports, you enter them independently of your culture. You base what you're trying to do on the parameters of the rules and the people that you're competing against. That's how you look at it. So whatever culture you're from, you walk into this new thing with this very rigid set of rules.
But
Like,
I don't
this is
think
the three-point line.
I don't think white people or Jews or Asians have a monopoly on valuing education or a monopoly on hard work or punctuality or anything. I think that black people have exactly the same capacity as any people of any other race to do all of these things, and those are the preconditions for success. So you either meet them or you don't. I mean,
Right.
that's true for everybody.
But for success. But don't you think that a lot of that is predicated on the environment that you develop in, and the people that you're around, and the lives that you imitate, and the influences that you have around you? Someone has to do something to influence those kids in a different way. Look, I was very fortunate when I was young that I discovered martial arts, and it kept me from being what I could have potentially been, a bad kid. It gave me something to focus on. And I didn't grow up in a bad environment, but it wasn't the best. There's a lot of people out there that grow up in horrific environments and they never have that thing. They never have something. They don't have a father around, or they don't have a mother around, or whatever bad influences they have are overwhelming. And they don't, it's very difficult for someone to just, air quotes, get their shit together. It's very difficult.
For sure.
That's why, to this day, there's so many books about losing weight. Don't you think everybody wants to lose weight that's fat? They do. Everybody who's fat wants to be thin. They do. But it's fucking hard.
For sure.
And that's nothing in comparison to changing your whole life.
But you would say about somebody losing weight, you know what's not useful here is lamenting how bad your family has had it with regard to losing weight. Like, at a certain point, if you want to lose the weight, you got to figure out a way to lose the weight.
That's true,
Now,
but this is based on the information that I have.
Okay, losing weight is a perfect example. there's a reason why Americans and Mexicans are fucking fatter than every other country on the planet. It is a systemic factor. It's not fucking culture. It's literally corn. It's corn, motherfucker. It's the corn lobby. It's not one single incident responsible for everything, but that's a big part of it. Okay? It's a perfect example that the losing weight is like such a perfect example of this argument, which is like, it's not individual responsibility. It's literally the prevalence of the corn lobby and how high fructose corn syrup is in our diets, like plays such a fundamental role in our diets. Great example. It's the way that we market foods. It's the access. It's food deserts. It's the access to fucking healthier alternatives. It's the education revolving around food. It's marketing. All of these are systemic issues that make it infinitely harder for an individual to even go down the pathway of corrective behavior. Some might not even fucking know that they have an opportunity or that what they're doing currently is wrong. Most don't.
I have this vast scope of information that I've been able to absorb. If you're in these isolated environments and everyone around you is involved in gangs and crime and drugs, it's very difficult to model yourself after something that you don't see in real life.
Well, so totally true. Totally true. And that's why, again, more information needs to get into areas. I agree with a lot of the opportunities that need to be provided by education. Getting people to be educated outside their local public school would be a good change. I mean, being able to like move outside your crap local public school and go somewhere else would be good.
The best influences for kids that grow up in these environments seem to be people that have gotten out and then come back and talk to them.
Right.
And tell them how to do it.
But
and
none of this has
can
to do.
Be done.
But to go back to the original conversation, none of this has to do with telling kids that you live in an evil country that's seeking to keep you down.
Well, maybe not, but there has been a very small amount of emphasis placed on taking these impoverished communities and figure out how to engineer them out of the situation.
Well, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's
You
true.
don't
Yeah, I mean, the
love
amount
the
that we've
spirit of
spent
justice.
on a federal level
You
and a
love
state
your
level
father, the
on
devil.
educational programs and poverty programs.
Over time. But like,
No, on a year-to-year level. I mean, these are enormous quantities of money. This is not really a money problem. It really is not a money problem in just terms of you could sign everybody a check tomorrow, right? The predicate. So the predicate for the slavery reparations movement is exactly this: sign everybody a $80,000 check, and the problem will be alleviated.
No, it won't.
I don't think that's right.
I think they'll spend the $80,000 and they'll be right back where they started from. But I do think that they're.
Okay. First of all, that's not true. That's only one form of reparations that I guess is like most commonly used to shit on the idea of reparations. I think the best possible form of reparations is by committee designating or allocating specific amount of resources to underfunded, impoverished black communities and having committees created with leaders of that community, including academic. Like, this is what Ta-Nehisi Coates at least talks about, which is having community leaders designate certain resources, taking resources and putting it to use in areas of need. And secondly, this idea that like poor people don't know how to fucking spend the money if they get money is really dumb, because study after study, including those that I'm sure Joe Rogan is familiar with as a consequence of having Andrew Yang on, show that poor people know how to make their money work a lot better than what is expected.
There is an argument that there can be some way of engineering, whether it's community centers or education or doing something differently in these places to chip away at this problem.
So on that stuff, we totally agree. The only point that I'm making about the 1619 Project is when you teach people that they are the victims of a society, it makes it very difficult for them to succeed. The story of Black America should be a story of unbelievably brave people triumphing over systems that sucked. Right? I mean, that is the story of Black America. Most Black Americans do not live under the poverty line in the United States. There's a huge Black middle class. There's a Black upper class, too.
Yes, there is. Let's simplify this if we can.
Sure.
If Ben Shapiro is the king of the world, how do you fix Baltimore? How do you fix Detroit? How do you fix the south side of Chicago?
Okay, so here's the unpopular view, but it happens to be empirically correct. The first thing you have to do is you have to load the place with police. You got to load the place with police because you have to stop crime. Once you stop crime, then businesses are happy to invest.
Empirically true? Wait, but that's already happened, Ben. You know those cities, famously crime-ridden cities? You know the one famous aspect of those crime-ridden cities is that there's no cops there.
You
like
love your father,
the south side of Chicago. Like when I think about the south side of Chicago, I think of like how little police are there. That's why. Like there's just never been any cops there, and that's why there's so much crime. It's just famously known for zero cops
In those areas.
I like that he said empirically this is true, by the way. I guess the war on drugs never happened and definitely wasn't a burden on black development. Yeah, we should definitely keep doing. Isn't this the same people? Aren't these like the conservatives the same people? Like the definition of an insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. Like, and why the fuck are you advocating for that right now? You're literally doing that.
Businesses to invest in those areas and provide jobs unless the crime is gone. You need, in fact, one of the reasons that you have such a vast differential in racial crime in the United States is because of white racism. And this is a point that Jane Levy, writer for the LA Times, has made. She wrote a book called Ghetto Side, and she points out that the reason that black crime was so high in the early 20th century and late 19th century is because basically white communities said to black communities, you're on your own, right? Enjoy. And so the crime rates ended up spiking because there were no police there. You have to make sure that law-abiding people are protected, that law-abiding businesses.
I mean, there was, I think, another reason.
You don't love the spirit of justice.
Is he talking about the 20s or is he talking about the 60s? Because if he's talking about the 20s, there's a different reason. And that reason is that it was illegal to be black in white spaces.
You don't love the spirit of justice.
You think that would kind of factor into this conversation,
you
no?
Are a spawn
or
straight from Hillary's v. MAGA. You are a spawn straight from Hillary's v. MAGA.
I mean, I feel like that would be a significant, that would play a significant role. I mean,
spawn straight from Hillary's v. MAGA.
Ben admits that.
You are a spawn straight from Hillary's v. MAGA.
You don't love the spirit of justice.
That's kind of odd that it's like, oh no, it's because actually black people were self-policing and they just can't do it. Just say the N-word at this point, dude. Just get it over with. I feel like you want to say it so bad.
Can you
are protected, that people want to live there, that people want to invest there. You have to have a reestablishment of faith in churches, right? You need social institutions outside of government that are promoting things like family. You need more. One of the reasons you need more companies in these areas is they can offer educational opportunities to kids, internships, deals to go to college, and then come back and work.
Shapiro is fucking king of the world. And with his magic wand, instead of solving any sort of serious, significant material inequalities that exist, decides what black communities need is more private businesses coming into their communities, dude. You know, if there was a fucking Chipotle in the south side of Chicago, the crime would just go down. That's what the black people need.
For us for a couple of years, right? You need opportunity, the same way that opportunity is built anywhere else on earth.
By the way, speaking of which, what the fuck happens when you gentrify a neighborhood, dude? What happens? What happens when you gentrify a neighborhood, which is what he's describing, is like gentrification will help. Okay? You just push out the poor population to other parts. You just push the population out. You didn't solve the problem, just like, ironically, the homelessness problem that he was talking about before, which is you didn't solve the problem. You just pushed it away from your sight. You pushed it away from your line of sight. That's what happened in New York. It's great. That's great. But if you don't solve the problem, eventually homelessness or any number of these different issues like crime, for example, they start happening right in front of your eyes too. You can't keep pushing the problem away further and further out of these urban areas and expect it to go away. It doesn't work that way. At some point, Republicans have to be like, all right, we got to look at the root cause of these issues instead of
You don't
trying
love
to
the spirit of justice.
take a
You love your father.
non-preventative, retroactive approach where you just fucking push it away.
You need to provide a safe space for business to work and for free speech to flourish and for education to be valued. You need to go in, you need to make clear to every kid, if you graduate high school, then you will have a shot at college, which, by the way,
I love that. It's like poor black communities just simply had no one tell them that if you graduate high school, you can go to college. And then, of course, that opens up a whole different fucking set of problems there, too. If you graduate college, then you can potentially go. I mean, if you graduate high school, you can potentially go to college for $700,000. Like, you can't even do that. So then there's that, too. If you graduate high school, then maybe you can go to college that's insanely expensive and then, you know, subject yourself, if you can get loans, to a lifetime of debt. And then maybe if you graduate college, then maybe, just maybe, you can get a shitty job peddling insurance to your friends and family. Okay, sick. Oh.
Is 100% true today. If you're a black kid and you graduate high school with any level of achievement, you will have a very solid shot of at least going to a community college. And if you score even decently on the SATs, of going to a very high-level college, right? Affirmative action programs are extraordinarily common across the United States. But the first message is, we are going to ensure that law and order prevail here, a safe space for life, liberty, and property, and ownership of private property. And we are going to make sure that you as a law-abiding citizen have the opportunity to succeed. Because the biggest obstacle to young black kids growing up in the inner city, again, is not history. It is in the moment. The drugs, the crime, the fact that there are no fathers in a lot of these areas. Roland Fryer, black professor at Harvard, he's done excellent work showing that actually the number one factor in allowing kids to rise is not even having a father in the home. It's how many fathers there are generally in a community. So you can have a single mom, but if there are a lot of other male...
Where are the fathers, Ben? Where are they? Are they in the other gentrified neighborhood? Is that what they're doing? Where are the fathers, Ben? Where the fuck are the fathers, Ben? And if you say jail, how did they get there? Some inexplicable reason. And if you say, oh, they're doing crimes, ask the question, why? Oh, because they were also fatherless. You know, American slavery can be explained by two fundamental factors: the fatherlessness in the black community. The Jim Crow laws, fatherlessness. It's the fatherlessness that's the problem.
Father figures around that helps fill in the gap, right? These are practical things. Giving kids the ability to pick the school they go to so they don't have to go to the local crappy public school if it's a local crappy public school.
I hate
would be a solution here. But this all starts with the notion that it is not racist in the slightest to suggest that law and order have to prevail and that law-abiding people should be protected in their exercise of their rights.
I think you're 100% right.
Yeah, we need to keep defunding the schools so that with like school choice voucher programs, and then fund the police state further. Yo, this is so fucked. This is why this is evil. This isn't just like being confused. This is straight up staring at the fucking barrel of the gun and saying, that's good. I like this. We need to do more of this. We need to pull the trigger. How about instead of fucking school choice, we fund the fucking schools, idiot? Because once again, very similar to Ben Shapiro's gentrification take, it's like, or his homelessness take, school voucher programs avoid the fucking original problem, like all of the kids that won't be able to get the vouchers or go to a different fucking school. Now all you've done is even further underfund the original school that these kids were supposed to leave. What do we do about the original school?
Right on that.
Great
and I think,
stuff.
although that might be an unpopular opinion, I agree with you.
Man, I fucking hate this shit. All right, that's it. That's all of it, by the way. We watched all of it. We did. I'll probably put a lot of these takes on my YouTube as well. For those of you who couldn't sit through fucking 7.5 hours. But what a dumb thing. We're all stupider as a consequence of this.